Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome. Nice to see so many people in the audience. It's a regularly scheduled meeting of council for January the 27th. I'm Kevin Murdoch, the mayor of Oak Bay, and we have a full council here tonight. We like to just start our meetings by recognizing that we hold these meetings in the traditional territories of the Coast and Straits Salish peoples. Specifically, we recognize the Lekwungen people, known today as the Songhees and Kasapsum nations, and how their connections to these lands and adjoining waters continue to this day. Our first order of business is just approval of the agenda. Moved and seconded. Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Unopposed? That carries. We have two sets of meetings, both from January 13th. We can move them both simultaneously. Moved and seconded. Are there any changes or corrections to the minutes? Seeing any? All those in favor? Any opposed? Unopposed? My mayor's remarks tonight are mercifully short. Just want to let everybody know there is a town hall coming up on this Thursday at 7 p.m. So we're trying to have a series of these throughout the course of the year, just a chance to have a bit more of an informal discussion with our community. So as really points people want to talk about, we'll do our best to talk about them. And that'll be held at the Monterey Center this Thursday at 7 o'clock. And I just want to acknowledge Oak Bay Volunteer Services, if you don't know, is an incredible connector for our community. They help provide hundreds of volunteers, matching up with even more hundreds of people who need those support services, everything from doing taxes to just driving and everything in between. They hosted a community connector event for the region last week, which I was able to attend, and I just want to acknowledge their organization and the hard work going on in developing systemic tools within our community and across the region for community connectors. So for people who need, particularly seniors, social supports, medical supports, and helping people find the right resources and navigate the very complicated systems that are out there. It's a small group here in Oak Bay. They were working at this case with United Way of British Columbia, Vancouver Island. But it's really interesting to see how these groups are coming together to serve the communities. And so I don't get a chance to recognize Oak Bay Volunteer Services very often, so it's nice to have had a chance to go to one of their events and see some of that work that they're doing. Up next is our public comment and question period. And for those who are here more regularly, you probably know what this is, but basically we have items on the agenda that are available that are open for public input, and we seek public input for items on the agenda at the time of those items. So we'll call you forward with the opportunity to speak when that agenda item comes forward. This is an opportunity just to address council on other matters that might be of interest to council that aren't on the agenda. I do have to highlight one thing because there has been some change. And that is just if you're here this evening to provide public input on Section 7 bylaws and permits, which is not subject to public input. For these types of applications, public is only permitted during a scheduled public hearing. About a year ago, the province amended legislation, specifically Section 464, subsection 3 of the Local Government Act, where public hearings on residential development proposals are prohibited if the application is consistent with the OCP. So tonight, this legislation applies only to one item, and that's to item 7.2, which is a zoning bylaw amendment for 2101 Sutherland Road. So that item doesn't have public input. It means we also are not allowed to have public input, even at this portion of the meeting, on those items, because they'll deem it a public hearing if we do that. So we're managing tonight's meeting in accordance with that legislation. No public input on that item. It does say that in the agenda, but if anybody's wondering why, because we have in the past allowed public input on those kinds of applications, that is the reason why. That being said, all of us try to be here and debate and raise issues reflecting different points of view. And so that's our job as elected officials. And of course, you're always welcome to reach out to us one-on-one to talk about any item. Just appreciate your understanding of our processes and how they're changing a little bit with some of this new legislation. So with that, back to the main point of this portion of the meeting. You have up to 3 minutes if you wish to come forward and talk to us about any item that's not on the agenda tonight, but is of interest to Oak Bay. You're welcome to come forward. I think when we have crowds this large, please come forward. Yeah, so you can be a demo. This is perfect. So we try and be friendly. Just have a seat. If you push the button in the middle, it turns on the microphone. All we ask for the minutes is that you don't have to lean into it. You can be sit back. It's fine. You just need your name, municipality. You don't have to give your address. Just your municipality of residence, and then you have up to 3 minutes to talk to us. All right. Very good.
Okay. Good evening. I'm Marianne Lidstone of Oak Bay Municipality. My remarks relate to safety and accessibility concerns that will be exacerbated in our Chevy neighborhood. If additional out-of-scale density is approved. As a reminder, Chevy represents Carrick, Haultain, Epworth, Florence, Fair, and East Down streets. Sorry.
Just so you know, the first time I ever spoke at a council meeting, I sat there, and it was the most nervous I've ever been in a council chamber. So there's something about sitting there facing us.
See, I wasn't accounting when I practiced this. I wasn't accounting for this part in terms of the 3 minutes.
It's okay.
So.
Just take a breath, and we're good. Yeah.
As you and all of our Oakbay councillors know from the walkabouts and meetings we had with you in November and December, we already have 7 apartment buildings along Haultain Street. Sorry. There are also several duplexes on Fair Street, as well as homes with suites throughout the neighborhood. Additionally, there are numerous apartments along Cadboro Bay Road near Oakbay High School. This densification creates much competition for street parking. Additionally, we have parking for church events, hospital employees who park in our area to avoid paying at the hospital, and the lack of enforcement of resident-only parking, which means some Oakbay High students and also others park on our streets. Because of this congestion on our streets, it creates safety concerns at crosswalks, intersections, driveways, and throughout the streets for pedestrians, cyclists, and pets. With our streets being used by commuters to Oakbay High, Willows, and St. Patrick's schools, Oakbay Rec Centre, the Royal Jubilee Hospital, and its cut-throughs to avoid congestion on Cadboro Bay and Foul Bay roads, safety is a paramount concern. You will recall that a few of us spoke to you about the accidents and near accidents we have observed and encounters on our streets, including my husband. The competition for parking also means that for many people, accessible parking is insufficient. This is especially true for the apartment dwellers, where there is considerably less than a 1-to-1 ratio of on-site parking for the numbers of units in their buildings. For those of us in neighboring homes, we often find our driveway access squeezed and sight lines blocked as our apartment neighbors attempt to park within a block of their homes. We support the 4 to 6 housing units on residential lots that the province has mandated, but further 4 and 6 story densification will compound these serious safety and accessibility concerns we already have in the Chevy area. Some developers will tell you that our neighborhood is decidedly short of rental, and that's a quote, of rental housing that meets the needs of families. Actually, several suites, duplexes, and apartments are being rented by families now. However, buildings built with primarily 1-bedroom apartments to squeeze in more units won't accommodate family needs. In closing, I want to emphasize that I and my Chevy neighbors are in favor of development as outlined by the province. Additional 4 to 6 unit housing developments with on-site parking would be welcome. Such gentle densification in our established neighborhood would allow for family occupancy rather than primarily single or double occupancy, while contributing less to our many safety and accessibility challenges. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lidstone. Thank you, Ms. Lidstone. And you were actually under your 3 minutes anyway, so you did a good job of that. So you were. I will ask, and I really appreciate the spirit with which the applause was given. I think it's nice to give the support, but I also, part of our culture here is to make sure that all points of view are welcome, and sometimes if there's applause for anybody speaking, it makes other people feel intimidated, so we just try and respectfully listen to everybody that are here. So with that, I'll just go to the next speaker. Please go ahead. No, you have to push it again. Same process.
Okay.
Just name and municipality to start.
My name is Ann Mathers, and I'm an Oak Bay resident. I'm here to voice my concern with the development proposed for the corner of Fair and Eastdown. Specifically, the size and scale of this development is clearly too large and is not suitable for this location. What would be suitable? 2 to 3, maybe 4 homes that would fit, townhomes that would fit in the context and scale of the buildings in this neighborhood. Homes for families to become part of and enrich the sense of community that Oak Bay is so specially known for. In his application, the developer states that the proposal will enliven the neighborhood, but let's be clear, our Oak Bay neighborhood is not seeking to be enlivened. Those words did enliven me, however, to find out what the apartment would actually look like on that lot. Bear in mind the following Oak Bay OCP guideline for multi-unit residential DPA zoning, which is needed for this development to proceed. And Local Government Act, Section 25, the land use regulation that states all bylaws or works undertaken by local government must be consistent with the OCP. So here is the Oak Bay OCP guideline for site planning and building. Design and build new development to contribute to the cohesion, visual identity, and the quality of streetscapes, particularly when the adjacent and nearby buildings are similar to each other in scale, proportion, rhythm, and pattern. Please note that the Oak Bay planner himself has marked a question mark in the report to the advisory design panel as to whether this proposal satisfies this important guideline. Now please see page 1 of the handout that was distributed, and you'll see how this all checks out. The upper image is the architect's drawing of the streetscape with the new apartment building. The lower image, the residential roof lines in the drawing were aligned with those of the current homes, and the drawing erased to reveal the true appearance of the streetscape. Notice how the architect's drawing skews the size of the apartment buildings on Haultain Street. In fact, those buildings are barely discernible and decidedly not of the local streetscape. Quite a contrast to the architect's interpretation. But I think the pine tree and the utility pole say it the best. The pine tree on Fair Street is about 45 feet tall. The utility pole near the corner of Eastdown is 32 feet tall. These two features are useful yardsticks for us non-architects because, coincidentally, the proposed apartment building is also 45 feet tall, excluding the top deck with its structures and landscaping. Together, the height is at least 55 feet, 10 feet taller than the tree, 23 feet taller than the utility pole. Now please turn to the second page of that handout and see what the building will actually look like in the context of this tree and utility pole. Take a moment to soak this in. The new apartment building is literally squeezed onto the lot with a mere 2-meter setback on the east and west sides. It's just 1.5 meters from a high voltage line, and it shoots skyward from there to tower in the surrounding neighborhood, blocking sight lines and sunlight from nearby properties. I'll just leave this image with you to ponder. And the next time you pass by Fair and Eastdown, remember the familiar phrase, look up, look way up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And for those curious, we don't have this application in front of council tonight. It will be coming in because it requires, I believe it requires an OCP amendment, but certainly a rezoning. It will have opportunity for public input at the public hearing portion, but we do allow for general public input anytime on items of interest, so this qualifies as that. So anybody else wish to come forward and speak to council on matters that are not on the agenda tonight? I'll look online as well in case there's anybody. Yeah, please come forward. I think you probably got the rhythm of this down a little bit. Name, municipality of residence, and please go ahead.
My name's Cal Velikowski from White Wolf Homes, Saanich, and just here to say that I appreciate you guys listening to our application last month, and I'm here to answer any questions you might have on 7.2, 12101 Sutherland.
Right, yes, you are allowed to speak to that as the applicant, but if there's any questions, thank you. Other items of interest to the public? Not on the agenda tonight? If not, I'm going to close off this section of the meeting and move on with the agenda items. Thank you for that. If you are here just to speak to that, you're more than welcome to leave at this time. Yep, welcome. Yep. Have a good evening. So moving on, it frees up some seats for other people. That's great. We move to item number 6.1. We have 2 appeals for decision of tree removals. The first one is a beech tree at 2353 Dalhousie Street. Ms. Plouffe, I believe you're taking this on and for an introduction, and we have Mr. Hyde-Lay here as well to answer any questions. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Murdoch. The report is straightforward. I won't do an introduction because you're very familiar, council's very familiar with these. Mr. Hyde-Lay is here to answer any questions regarding the arborist report or anything that you see in the report.
Thank you very much. I see a hand poking up already, so we'll, because this is an item for public input, this is a good chance for us to establish a rhythm. Our process here is we will have any questions that council may have of staff or an applicant in such a case. At the conclusion of questions, we'll open it up for the members of the public to make any comments or ask questions themselves. At the conclusion of that, we come back to this table. We can follow up with additional questions or get to motions to advance the matter at hand. So that's what's going to happen now. We'll go to questions first. Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
Thanks very much, Mayor. And through you to Mr. Hyde-Lay. I noticed that the letter from the owner states that the tree is diseased and has been affected by new construction from an adjacent lot. And I'm just wondering if you could give your opinion on that, because that was the opinion of the proponent, but I didn't see anything from Parks on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. In conversation with the municipal arborist, he felt that the construction next door would be non-impactful to the actual beech tree. And in regards to the disease that it does have is called, the common name is white mottled rot. It's a Ganoderma. It is a heart rot and root rot fungus. It's an annual fungus, meaning that it comes back every year, and from that you can determine a general sense of how advanced the decay is. So this was the first year that we saw that fungus. Many trees have it, and often a healthy tree will outgrow any wood that is decayed by the fungus itself. So the municipal arborist recommended to further evaluate the root plate of the tree to see if there was any disease in the actual structural roots of the tree.
Go ahead, Councillor
Thank you.
Braithwaite.
And then, so in your opinion, is there a concern that the tree might fall down because of that disease?
Mr. Hyde.
As of right now, I would consider that risk low, Councillor Braithwaite.
Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. Councillor Smart, then Appleton.
Thank you, Mayor, through you, Mayor, to Mr. Hyde-Lay. I was just curious what the residents' options are in the future should a year from now more disease be noted. I'm wondering what is the earliest a resident could possibly come back for a reconsideration based on new information?
I think if the tree was evaluated in a more thorough way, that would answer that question. Just to be able to see how advanced the decay is at this time, as the municipal arborist and I certainly feel it would be low. As I mentioned earlier on, often a tree will put on new wood than wood is decayed, so you have a balance, an equilibrium. Many trees in the district do have decay, and you always look for management and balance. And if the resident is really concerned, I would follow the recommendation of actually having a more thorough evaluation than just a visual look at the tree, which is what our arborist did.
Please continue.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, to Mr. Hyde-Lay. Am I to understand then that the resident, regardless of tonight's decision, could go and get an independent arborist report and then follow up again in a period of time? I just wanted to know what the options are if council were to uphold the decision tonight for the resident. Thank you.
I think this is in reference to the language in our procedure on this, which is that decisions of council are final and not appealable, essentially, is that I don't know if Ms. Plouffe would have an answer to that better than Mr. Hyde-Lay, but I'll give it to one of you to answer the question of if things change in future, what is the process for, I mean, I know the process would be go back to staff and have it reevaluated, but is there an additional future potential application to council? Please go ahead, Ms. Plouffe.
Thank you, Mayor. I just was quickly looking at the bylaw, but if something has changed with the tree and they have the tree assessed and there's further damage or rot to the tree, they can come back to the district and reapply for a tree removal permit, and they can present staff with that new information. It'll be reassessed again by the district arborist, and then a decision will be made at that point.
Thank you. Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Worship, and through you to staff. Then I'll be brief, because I guess what I hear by that is that there is, I don't see supporting information from a third-party arborist, or the applicant is not attached to anything of that nature. So maybe it's to the applicant, but I don't see a third-party arborist review of the tree at this time. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, Councillor Appleton.
Any other questions? Oh, go ahead, please continue.
Oh, thank you, Worship. Just really briefly. In the sense, through you to staff, in the sense of monitoring the tree, because essentially the applicant has sort of indicated in their correspondence or in their they're saying, well, this is an inexorable decline to failure, is how they're sort of characterizing it. Is I would say that from what you're describing and the type of disease that or the type of fungus that's involved, that regular monitoring will be able to relatively easily indicate, or at least in a fairly straightforward sense, indicate whether or not the tree is in fact in decline. So if if a program was engaged in monitoring the tree on a regular basis, you would be able to identify if it was going in the wrong direction. Do I have that right?
That's correct, Councillor Appleton.
Thank you. Don't see other questions from council. Is there anybody from the audience who wishes to speak to council about this agenda item? This agenda item is a consideration of or an appeal for tree removal at 2353 Dalhousie Street. It is open to public input. Anybody wishes to speak to us about it? It's not what you're all here for? Okay, we'll come back to this table.
I'll move receipt.
So move receipt of the report. Moved and seconded. Thank you. All those in favor of receipt? Any opposed? None opposed?
I would make a motion to uphold the staff recommendation.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Okay, I do not require it for vote, so I will go then to call the question. The question here is to uphold the staff decision, which is essentially denying the request to remove the tree. All those in favor? Any opposed? Or is there none opposed? That carries. So to the applicant, that no approval at this time, but we'll certainly keep monitoring the tree and make sure that its condition is monitored. Item number 6.2 is a similar request, but different situation with an Atlas cedar tree at 2345 Cranmore Road. Ms. Plouffe, you again.
Thank you, Mayor Murdoch. So this is another tree, it's another appeal for council's consideration. I just want to clarify in this report that I inadvertently wrote that the tree was not close to utility lines, but it is, as you can see in the photos. And my understanding is that BC Hydro maintains the tree to keep it from growing into the lines. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you very much. Are there questions of staff on this item? Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
Thanks. Just to clarify, it is an Atlas cedar. It's not an Atlas oak, as was mentioned in the proponent's letter. I think they called it an Atlas oak.
Cedar.
I know, but in the proponent's letter, they called it an Atlas oak tree removal. But it is an Atlas cedar, right?
Yeah, the staff indicated yes.
Yeah. So could pruning, Mr. Hyde-Lay, can pruning take care of some of the branches that may be considered at risk of falling? Or is there a way to know that? Or I know that you can sometimes go in and figure out which limbs to take off to prune to make the tree a little bit more stable.
Mr. Hyde-Lay?
Through you, Mayor, thanks, Councillor Braithwaite. Yes, that's certainly a possibility to go in and shorten some of the longer branches to lateral branches, and that would begin to reduce any wind sail in the tree. But it's a tree that will always have to be managed. One of the reasons being is that it's very close to a three-phase power line, but that will be Hydro's responsibility. But the rest of the tree crown can be managed to minimize breakage in wind.
Thank you very much. Are there other questions from members of council on this? Councillor Green?
Through you, Mayor, to Mr. Hyde-Lay, thank you very much for the report. Just a question on the pruning aspect. Do you have any input with BC Hydro on how they prune trees? And I only say that, and no offense to BC Hydro, but the tree is awkwardly pruned. Is there a way that we can work together with BC Hydro so the pruning is more effective or more efficient looking? Thank you.
Mr. Hyde-Lay, I think I know the answer to this question.
Thanks for the question, Councillor Green. We don't really have much control over what BC Hydro does to publicly owned trees, but we do have constant conversation with them, and do have those conversations usually fall along the lines of proper arboricultural practices. It wouldn't stop us from having that conversation with BC Hydro in regards to modifying the crown of the tree, but their sole purpose is to achieve a 3-meter clearance from the primary line. There's not a lot of thought given to the rest of the architecture of the actual tree itself. That would be the responsibility of the homeowner.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Green. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you to Mr. Hyde-Lay. Thank you for the report. In addition to the regular tours that our park staff does throughout the district, and Hydro, as you've said, prunes this, could you just enlighten us as to what would be the frequency that the Hydro would, in fact, monitor trees like this and decide on pruning? What's the process?
Mr. Hyde-Lay, if you know the answer.
Through the mayor, thanks, Councillor Patterson. It really depends on the tree species. A tree like this, it would be infrequent because it's a relatively mature tree that would have something of a slow growth pattern. When a tree like a linden tree on one of the Poet Streets would have much more vigorous growth, would have to be managed on a far more frequent basis.
Thank you. Not seeing any other questions before I invite anybody, members of the public who wish to speak, you can raise your hand at this time and you can come forward. I just have one question on this one, and that is just different trees prune differently, and I'm curious, is this the kind of tree in which branches can be sort of pruned back and managed and have healthy growth, or is it one of these ones where it's sort of, you cut it and it's essentially dead at that point and nothing else grows out? I'm trying to get a sense of how aesthetic this can be with some of the pruning that's suggested as part of this management. Through me to you, Mr. Hyde-Lay.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would say yes and no. The tree's already been modified for BC Hydro, by BC Hydro, so it's lost some of its natural form if you wanted to make a comparison to the blue atlas cedar that's on the island on Southdown at Lansdowne. But certainly there are laterals that you can cut to, but it does push the tree into a you begin to lose some of the natural shape of what a blue atlas cedar actually is meant to look like, and it would require periodic maintenance to maintain that.
And just as a layperson looking at the tree, it looks like it's getting, like it's quite top heavy at this point, like the foliage is up quite high. And does that cause any inherent concerns for the longevity of the tree?
Thank you, Worship. Not so much, but it certainly needs some modification, and the manipulation that BC Hydro has done does change the form of the tree somewhat, where you'll get growth where you may not, but at the same time, the rest of the canopy can be managed or manipulated, so it may look a bit more like a species of tree that it's meant to.
Thank you. Any members of the public who wish to speak to us? This is, again, item of Atlas tree consideration for removal, 2345 Cranmore Road. Anybody wish to speak to us on that? Is in the audience tonight or online? Check my. Don't see hands raised online. Don't see any members of the public, so back to this table then. Councillor Appleton.
Move receipt of the staff report, Your Worship.
Seconded, debate receipt of reports. All those in favor? Any opposed? Unopposed?
And then I will move that the decision denying the request to remove the Atlas cedar tree at 2345 Cranmore Road be upheld.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. Is there discussion? Not seeing any. I think always have people have their own rationale for these pieces. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. That carries. We move to item then, we're moving to section 7. These two items do not have public input, so we will go through them. The first one is an adoption motion for a streets and traffics bylaw. Is Mr. Memore in here, or Mr. Rennick online? So we have a Director of Engineering and Public Works online to introduce this item. Welcome, Mr. Rennick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me all right?
We can, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I don't have an introduction prepared for this item as it was presented at the previous meeting, but if there are any questions, I would be happy to take them.
Thank you very much. This bylaw has had the first 3 readings already, so if there's any questions, I'll take those at this time. Not seeing any, perhaps I'll get a motion. Could we just have it read aloud? The
I'll
motion
move
to
that the Streets and Traffic Bylaw number 4100, 2000 Amendment Bylaw number 4898, 2025 be adopted.
moved and seconded. Any discussion on the adoption? We usually have the debate and discussion at second reading, so no surprise. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. And then we move to item number 7.2. This is a zoning bylaw amendment at 2101 Sutherland Road. Mr. McStravick, welcome back.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good evening, Council. This application is for a text amendment rezoning, zoning bylaw amendments for the property at 2101 Sutherland Road. Council previously considered a staff report on this application on the 9th of December of 2024, so I'll avoid repeating all the detail involved there. But since Council previously considered this application, since that time, the applicant has submitted a community amenity contribution in accordance with Council's policy, and as a public hearing for this application may not be held under the Local Government Act, the legislative decision before Council tonight is to consider whether or not to give the proposed bylaw first through 4th readings. Thank you very much. And the applicant is here, Kyle Velikovsky, if there's any questions for him.
Thank you very much. I saw the applicant here. And yes, the first 4 readings is all the readings required. We can do them all on one night, which is not so usual. Again, for our processes, usually we have first 3 readings and then come back, so we're allowed to do all 4 at this meeting tonight. Are there any questions from members of council to the applicant or to staff on this item? I'm not seeing any. And just for those wondering why there's not questions, because this is a land use piece, this did go through a fairly extensive conversation and recommendation back as noted in December. So this is the bylaws that essentially codify that recommendation from council at that time. So not seeing any and not having any public input, I would seek motions from council, please. Please go ahead.
Your Worship, I would move receipt of the staff report.
Seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed? Please continue.
Yes, so I would move that zoning bylaw number 3531, 1986, amendment bylaw number 4897, 2025, for the property located at 2101 Sutherland Road be read a first, second, and third time.
Seconder? Seconded. Thank you. Is there any discussion or debate? If you wish to, okay, go ahead, Councilor Braithwaite.
Thanks, Mayor.
Sorry,
I'll be voting against this as per the reasons stated in previous meetings, which I felt that the 2 houses that are being proposed for this location are too big in massing and to cover up too much of the lot size. So I will be voting against this.
Thank you, Councilor Braithwaite. Councilor Green.
Thank you. I too will be voting against this application as I did in December for the same reasons as articulated by my colleague. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I always like to encourage people, if they're voting against something, to articulate why so that there's an understanding in the public record. So thank you for that. Any other discussion at this time? I'll call the question. All those in favor and opposed? I have Councilor Green and Councilor Braithwaite opposed.
Your Worship, I would move that zoning bylaw number 3531, 1986, amendment bylaw number 4897, 2025, for the property located at 2101 Sutherland Road be adopted.
We don't usually debate the final adoption motion if it's already had discussion, so I'll call the question. All those in favor and those opposed? Councilor Green and Councilor Braithwaite opposed. That application is approved. Congratulations and good luck with your project. We now come back to the section of the council meeting which is related to, which has public input, and I think probably we have some number of people here to speak to this particular item, and that is a development variance permit application for 786 St. Patrick. If you are here to speak to that item, the process follows the other public input pieces, which is we will have questions of council, of the applicant, or of staff. At the conclusion of the questions, we'll go to the public. We'll seek public input. Again, try to keep your comments to about 3 minutes each. And then at the conclusion of the public input portion, we'll come back to this table and we can continue with questions or give some direction to council at that time. So with that, I will hand this, I'm not sure who's presenting it. Is it Mr. Green? Welcome.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of council. This next item is a development variance permit application for the property located at 786 St. Patrick's Street. The purpose of the variance application is to reduce the minimum required second-storey setback from the south interior side lot line from 3 metres to 1.5 metres, and to increase the maximum required building height from 8.5 metres to 9.31 metres in order to construct a 3-unit infill style housing development. There is no variance to roof height. Just to note that the development is within the 10-metre roof height that is allowed under the bylaw. The only thing to add is that notification letters were sent out on January 15th to all properties within 50 metres of the subject property. And obviously there is a number of letters, correspondence that's been attached to the council report this evening in response to that notification. Happy to answer any questions that council may have on the application. I believe the applicant was invited to the meeting. I'm not sure if he or she is in the room today. Okay, great.
Welcome.
Yes, so the applicant is here.
So there may be some questions for the applicant here tonight, so that's entirely possible and probable. All right, so back to this table, looking for questions at this time from members of council. I will go to Councillor Braithwaite to start.
Thank you, and thanks for touching on the information in the letters, Mr. Green, in regards to the what some people have said that there was a lateness to the notification that they received. Can you just speak to that, because there was more than one person that brought that up?
Mr. Green?
Yes, so Council's development application procedure bylaw requires notification letters to be sent out at least 10 days before a council meeting. For this application, letters were sent out on January the 15th. And we also always send a letter to ourselves as well, just to see that how long things take and to see if we actually receive the notification letter. And so the district received its own notification letter back on January the 22nd. And so obviously those letters go with Canada Post. They're not sent registered mail or anything like that. They just go in regular mail. So I guess there's probably two issues. One, were they actually within the 50 metres? So what we do to generate that 50 metres is we generate a map in GIS, and then any properties that that 50 metre radius from the subject property, whether it touches the edge of that 50 metres, then we would send them a notification letter, and then we have a list, a mailing list that's generated through our records, I believe. And so then we would send out that letter to all property owners and occupiers of that specific address. And so, yeah, there was about 20, I think around 20 letters that were generated by that mailing list.
Thank you, Mr. Green.
So then, if they don't receive it till the 25th, or the 22nd, I think you said, and our meeting is on the 27th, is that then within our mandate of how many days' notice that we are supposed to give for something like this?
Through your worship, yes. The legislation requires us to make reasonable effort to send out notification letters. Obviously, council's procedure bylaw says at least 10 days before a council meeting we need to have letters out, and so we've complied with both the legislation and district's own development application procedures bylaw in that regard.
Thank you, and maybe a note to ourselves in the future that perhaps Canada Post is not the correct way to be getting these letters out. It might be that we do drop in the mailbox as we do for some of the engineering work that gets done. I know I had a letter dropped in my mailbox by staff. It didn't come through Canada Post, so that might be a better way for us to do notification in a neighborhood so they get at least 10 days notice, and that's just a comment for the future. Okay, I do have a couple of questions, and probably they're for the applicant. Because I do want to look at some of the...
Might just invite the applicant to come forward. You can just come to our desk here at the front. And assuming I do direct a question to you, I'll just get your name and municipality, residence for the record. But go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
Thank you. And I wasn't sure if we were going to have something up on the screen to be able to point out to, but it doesn't look like we have any information that's coming up on screen. So I'm going to have to try and describe. I'm not great at describing, so bear with me, what my questions are. So my first question would be in regards to the parking that is proposed on this site, and the rationale for having for one of the setbacks is that you need the space for the overhang for the parking. I believe that's what I read. And when I look at the drawings, I wonder, because you have a parking spot at the very end of the driveway, whether or not it would be feasible to only have, to count that as one parking spot, because right now you have 4 parking spots on site, to count that as one parking spot, and then to shorten up the need, or to take the need of one of the other angle parking spots away, that could then reconfigure the building to only have 2 parking spots that are angled.
I'm not sure I entirely followed that, but perhaps the applicant is clarify. Push the button in the middle, name and municipality of residence, and then you can answer the question.
Name
Welcome.
is Chunpreet Hare, and the residence is in Fairfield in Victoria. The reason that they're angled that way for parking is if we had it going at a 90 degrees angle, it would have taken up more space for the parking. Like, it would have been a harder turn, so we turned them on that angle to try to reduce the amount of hard space that's actually going to be there. I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Through you, Mayor. Sorry, no. I was saying that instead of having 3 angled spots and a straight on spot, why not have 2 angled spots and a straight on spot? Because you're only required to have 3 parking spots for that.
That is something that we could definitely take a look at. Yeah, I think that's something that could be done. This was just done for the sake of there's 3 garages, so that's why there's 3 spots like that. But yeah, we could take one of them away to have that be one of the spots. But when you're going to be selling them, they come with the garages, and those would be the spots. So that's why it's done that way, to minimize on the amount of, if we had them facing going at a 90 degrees angle, there would actually be more driveway space being taken up.
Thank you. And then I would just like to know, is it reasonable for me to ask what each unit might be getting sold for, approximately, or is that not a reasonable question for me to ask?
So so you can ask the question through me. You do not have to answer the question. At the end of the day, we're here to adjudicate the variance is being asked for. But if you wish to, if you know the answer.
That's what I was going to answer. Is we're still here at the variance stage, so we haven't, like, we're still in the beginning stages. We have a ballpark idea of what we're going to sell, but I don't want to jinx myself.
And then
They're not dedicated as affordable units or below market units. They'd be market rates, I think is fair to say.
Yeah. And then you're coming in and asking for 2 variances. As you know, we just changed our rules not that long ago. And we did just reduce the side lot line by about, or we increased it by 5 feet. And now you're asking us to, so we reduced it by 5 feet. So now you're asking us to reduce it again by another 5 feet. I'm wondering whether or not you could not look at this lot and try and get in without having to use any variances whatsoever.
There is a way to do it without any of the variances, and being the applicant, I would love to do it that way, but we're also trying to make it so that it's a good enough size for new families. That's why there's 3 bedrooms up. And when you do that, given the way that the variances are set up, we try to minimize the amount that we're doing it. That's why, again, I'm going to on the diagram there, it's not they're not facing a 90 degrees. Even the variance that we're asking for with the setback, there's only 3 small triangles that actually go over that line. It's not a straight line that's causing that variance to occur. It's we try to minimize it as much as possible. So to answer your question, if we were to do it without the variances, yes, but then we wouldn't be able to get 3 bedrooms up in the unit, and that was kind of one of the goals when we were looking at this. I was trying to avoid all the variances as much as possible, so that was the only way to give that with even with the new rules.
And then my last question would be around green space. Green space on this property looks pretty minimal. For each unit, it looks like they may have a very small area at the back of the unit as a small piece of grass. I can't tell from the drawing about how big that is. Can you explain to me how big the patio might be?
The patio, I believe, is about a 4x4 in the back of the units. But again, that's something that's not with the actual the variances that we're actually requesting. Like, this is the stuff that I was hoping, once we know which way we're going to go with the variances, we can definitely work with the driveway, with the spaces, and we want to maximize the amount of green spaces as possible as well. This is kind of at the beginning stages. To get to that next step of green space, like, we would work with the staff like we have been with these two variances. There's been a lot of back and forth going on since September. This isn't something that we just dreamt up and threw out there. Like this is, we were trying to do it in a way from an applicant side. Like I said, I've done builds and I would rather not have to ask for a variance.
Thank you, and sorry, just one more question came up. As I'm looking at the drawing, at the schematic here, and this probably would go to staff, it looks like there's a lot of covered area, driveway area within this application. Does it meet the bylaws for that, or has that been calculated yet?
Mr. Green?
Yeah, through the chair, yes, that has been calculated, and there is no variance or that meets the new R5 regulations in relation to lot coverage. Live landscaping requirements is also met. So, yeah, staff didn't have any concerns, or there's no variance being sought for those two issues that are now variable under the district's bylaw.
Thank you.
So that's for paved area, yeah.
Oh, sorry, yeah, as well as the front paved area and the rear paved area would also be met as well. So essentially the four impermeable measures, if you like, in our zoning bylaw: lot coverage, front yard, rear yard paving, and live landscaper, they are all met through this proposal.
Thank you very much. I had Councillor Green next.
Thank you very much. First, just a quick comment on notice by mail. I would also suggest that it be 10 business days as opposed to 10 days. And then weekends are not included in case people are away or something else. So that's just my comment on that one issue. But through you, Mayor, I just wanted to ask I just wanted to comment on the opportunity for public consultation. And I was just wondering through you through Mr. Green, was there an effort made by the applicant to consult with the neighborhood? He said he'd been doing this since September, but my understanding from the correspondence is that many people didn't know about this until a few days ago. So there is that opportunity for the developer to, it's called a public information session. Was that ever contemplated in the neighborhood? Because I think that's very helpful. So that's my question, was a public information session suggested or contemplated?
Go ahead, Mr. Green. My understanding is it's not applicable to these.
No, yeah, through the chair, there is no requirement for a public information meeting under the district's development application procedure bylaw for development variance permits. However, an applicant or some developers may go and speak with neighbours. I'm not sure in this case whether that occurred or not, but there is no requirement in any of the district's bylaws or policies for applicants to have information session meetings with development variance permit applications.
And just for the public's benefit, that's really they're intended for rezonings and other sort of larger applications that to ensure that there's an early input portion opportunity for more substantial changes. Mr. Green?
Yeah, the bylaw specifically states for an amendment to the district's official community plan, then there is set requirements for a public information meeting in relation to rezoning applications that is discretionary, and the director of community building and planning would determine whether an information session is required on a rezoning application.
Go ahead, Councillor Green.
Thank you. I guess my point is that even though it isn't required, it's a tremendous courtesy to the neighborhood and to adjacent neighbors in particular, immediate north and south to this lot. So I just think it's a great way to work with the neighborhood when something like this is going in. So that's all. That's my advice to any developer that comes forward, whether it's required or not. Thank you.
No further questions. Go ahead. I have Councillor Watson next in my tweaking order.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question to the applicant. Thank you for coming this evening. I think as Councillor Braithwaite mentioned, it's only just the end of June 2024 since we put in our new required framework for accommodating up to 4 units on all our residential lots. And I do, this is one of the smaller lots in the grand scheme of things for Oak Bay, but there are many lots this size. And I just wondered, given that you would have had access to that framework, if you took any time or opportunity to try and design something within the guidelines that have just been created. it's interesting to see this come immediately, as we're just seeing it as a variance request. But what's the design thinking that's been going on in the background that would even precipitate that? So have you taken time to try and do something where you wouldn't have had to come and ask for special permissions?
Yes, there was many different design aspects that we took a look at and tried, again, like I can't emphasize that more. I try to avoid the variances as much as possible, but again, our goal was to seek out to try to add affordable housing in the area for families that want to move in that maybe can't get this. You guys can laugh, but you guys don't even know what the price that these are going to go
So I
at.
think it's just as a courtesy, we do want to, you don't want, everybody will have a chance to speak, and we just should ask that we don't laugh or cheer or jeer.
So
in the
the
course of
goal
meeting.
of
Thank
this
you.
was to try to add 3-bedroom, 3 units. Like we looked at 4 units. We looked at 2 units. We looked at doing single family residential. We looked at all these different options and came up with a bunch of different plans. But the one that we were aiming to go for when I was initially looking at this lot was, can we, because like you said, that was June of 2024. So this is new to everybody. I feel like I'm positioned nicely as the eyes are looking at the back of my head, being the guinea pig for this. Our goal was to do a 3-bedroom, 3 units, and that's where we kind of set onto. But we knew to do that, we would have to ask for these variances. And to minimize the variances that we're asking for, that's why the second story setback, like that's why I'm trying to emphasize that is, it's not a complete line that's going up right across. It's those 3 little triangles, the triangles that you can see that actually go into that that variance. It's not a straight left to right. And we chose to tilt it over to the sides to try to avoid the windows looking directly on the left and the right. And even though it wasn't asked, if we try to go to the neighbors and ask that, no, it wasn't. And as Mr. Green said, that it wasn't a requirement. It's probably my own, I should have probably gone and maybe spoken to the neighbors, but this is my first go at a variance, and I didn't know where this was going to go prior to actually having to go back and seeing what we could get done. But like I said, we were trying to avoid the variances as much as possible.
Thank you. It's the first for all of us, so we're walking down this path together. Go ahead, Councillor Watson.
And just to follow up to that, thanks for walking us through your design rationale and various things you've looked at. But in terms of the flat roof, you're also asking for a variance with respect to total building height, I think. And I am guessing, but you're the designer and the developer, that the flat roof allows the 3 bedrooms because you don't lose the space that would be under the eaves if you did a sloped roof. Did you look at 2-bedroom options that would allow a different roof design?
Yeah, it's not the bedrooms that does the roof design. There's roof height and then there's building height. This is the building height. So if you look at the simple math of it, if you're going to do 3 stories, it's impossible to avoid the building height if you're going to be doing 9-foot floors, because you're starting off with 8 inches above grade when you start to build, and then you go 9 feet, so 3 meters, 3 meters, 3 meters, and we had to do a flat roof. Only because of that, we would love to do an arts and craft design and have a peaked roof, but then if we did that, we would be over the building height and we would be over the roof height. So to get a 3-story, you're automatically over the building height. So if we did 8 feet per floor, then we could come under that. That's why the second variance was actually brought to our attention by Oak Bay staff after the fact. We didn't initially know that we had done that. So if we stick with 9 feet, that's where we're over the building height. But if we dropped it down to 8 feet, then it would be. But again, with new builds, it's not just Oak Bay, but other municipalities, 9 feet is kind of the norm with new builds per story.
Thank you. Those are all my questions.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. I have Councillor Appleton and then Smart.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. I'll be very brief here because I think I know the answer to this already, but I'm assuming that the driveway and the drive aisle on the north side between the buildings and the setback, essentially the width of that driveway, that is the minimum as prescribed by our bylaws. I'm assuming it's designed that way for a reason, or it's that width for a reason, thus limiting the amount that the building can be shifted to the north. Is that correct?
I might give it, go ahead, Mr. Green.
Yeah, through Your Worship, Mr. Rennick, my colleague and engineer, may be best to answer that question, but it's my understanding we don't actually have a dry aisle width for private property. That is essentially the responsibility of the owner. So the district doesn't have any bylaws. There's nothing in our driveway access bylaw or within our zoning bylaw that controls dry aisle width, or in our parking facilities bylaw as well.
Thank you. I do note that from the drawing, it's right on the building envelope border, which should be 10 feet from the side lot. Councillor Appleton?
So I gather by that, then that's being driven more by setbacks than it is being strictly by the driveway, by a prescribed driveway width, which doesn't really exist.
I don't know if the applicant has anything else to add to that.
No, I don't know the answer to that, to be honest. Again, this was done by the designer. I'm the applicant, and then there's the builder. I'm not the builder either, but the driveway was, I just know that it complied with the regulation that was needed. That's why there was no variance. So
thank you. Good, thank you. I have next Councillor Smart.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, to the applicant. I'm just following up a little bit more on the building height, understanding that the roof height actually complies, but it's the definition of building height that's not complying. Just wondered, you did speak a little bit to somewhat of a standard of a 9-foot clear ceiling height. Obviously, an 8-foot in the basement, a 9-foot on the living floor, and an 8-foot on the bedroom would still be a fairly nice place, which would only put you 7 inches off, complying with both definitions. So I guess I'm just wondering, with that scenario, if you could describe a little bit the challenges and extra expense, or any reasons why, obviously not building slab on grade, a little bit above grade as you described, the reasons why you didn't go ahead and comply with both of the height definitions. Could you elaborate a little bit more on that?
the request was to try to maximize the ceiling height, so that's why we asked for 999. But there are ways to comply with the building height if we even went down 3 feet and started to build. So we could do that, but then that's when you get into getting into the roots of anything that's underneath the ground. We were trying to do it where we were minimizing the digging into the ground as well. Like if we were to go down, then yes, that would, it also adds additional cost to the build when we go down, because then you're dealing with retaining walls. You're dealing from 6 inch on the walls as much as 14 inches on the bottom walls. That's a cost, and the crowd laughing about it with the cost of selling it, that's going to be added on to the buyers as well. Like it's adding to the cost. We're trying to do it in a way that we can minimize it, but also offer the best product.
Anything else? Please continue.
Thank you. Through you, Mary, I have one additional question, and thank you for that information. With regards to the step back variance on the second and third floors, the increased variance, I was curious because I do appreciate how the current sawtooth design prevents both the direct outlook to the neighbors' windows, but also provides some variegation in the form. And I'm wondering if the variance isn't approved, would it likely turn the building into a flat wall to the neighbors with all the windows directly on? Or is there a different design approach that might be taken by simply having a regular shaped kitchens and bedrooms? So if you could just respond a little bit to how the design may transform if the variance isn't.
Yeah, if the variance isn't given, then there are ways to do that. The biggest thing is going to be just the lowering of the square footage per unit. So the obvious one would be on the third floor. It goes from 3 bedrooms up to 2 bedrooms would be the maximum we could offer. And then that's where, if you're a family, most people want at least 3 bedrooms up. If there's a family of 4, that's kind of what we were aiming for. But there are ways to do that to avoid the variance. We could still have it tilted. That wouldn't be something that we would have to go straight to a square design. You could still keep, I like this design of this, but really what we're trying to avoid is the dropping of the square feet, because then the unit size almost drops by 500 per unit. And 500 square feet is quite a bit when in these smaller units to start with.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smart. Any other questions at this time with the applicant? I'm going to just keep following up on this little line of questioning before we go to for public input on this. I guess I'm struggling a little bit in the same way with sort of the massing of the building as it sits right now. And so I think some of the questions around ceiling height, at least one of the floors, if those could be brought down a little bit. But my broader question is like the building height portion of, and we are learning how these bylaws work in real life. So this is a good, interesting case study as to how this matches out. But the intention, of course, of that was to, because it reduces the effect of massing by having some sloped roof, right? The building height is to the bottom of the roof line. So in a building like this, that's not necessarily a very substantial, it's not a peaked roof. It could be a more sort of hip roof style and so forth on there, but would have the same effect of reducing some of the massing on that. And I'm trying to get I'm wondering if you've looked at that in a sense of what would it actually do in real terms to that top floor? Like, if it would have just mean the bedrooms would essentially have some sloped roofs and a couple of the bedrooms and.
Yeah, to do arts and crafts, like that was the goal originally, but the reason that we went with the modern design is just to stay within the building height. Because then if we do the arts and crafts and do the peaked roofs, then we would have to ask for the second variance, which would be then the roof height as well. So yeah, to answer your question, the interior of the bedrooms, that you're still to get 8 feet, 8 feet, 8 feet, you still wouldn't be able to do peaked on that. Like to build a 3-story, the way that the bylaw is set up is it limits the type of roof that we would want. Like our original goal was to try to do arts and craft to fit more into the neighborhood as well, and not do the modern design, but to meet the bylaw and to come as close as we can to the variance. It was the flat roof.
Thank you. And I'm spending a bit more time on this than we normally do, but just because it is a new zoning and we're still learning the impacts of this, one of the conversations we had at the time of the zoning was looking at what the roof height should be. And there was some discussion about making it taller to allow for buildings to have, a tall peak, but not having the, didn't want tall flat roofs, but we were thinking in many of these cases to have the taller roof. So I'm just trying to get a sense of it. Are you suggesting that if the roof was taller, so it allowed for a peak, that the building height could actually be accommodated within
the building height, if we do 9, 9, and 9, there's no way to avoid the building height.
Okay.
But there are different municipalities, like in Victoria, they do allow the measurement of the roof heights from the center of the roof, it still allows you to give that visual of peaks in different areas, but the center of the roof height is still in compliance. But that's not something that Oak Bay currently offers. So I would, if I could make a recommendation, would be that gives it the nicer appeal of an arts and craft and avoids the modern. But according to the bylaws right now, this was the way to comply.
Okay. Yeah, that's essentially our building height is that center of the roof line portion of it as a measure of massing. And just for my clarification, I'm just trying to understand if there's mechanisms here by which we can accommodate most of your ask, but reduce the massing and impact on neighbor approaches. And so if the building height were enforced and used like a slate, like a hip roof or something like that to kind of bring in the angle at the top, so the building height is more in compliance. You can still have, ceiling heights within the roof height. Would that be a viable possibility within
the second variance, which is the building height, is definitely viable. Like I said, there's 2 ways of doing that. We can drop every floor down to 8 feet, but my goal would probably be still 9 feet and just start it off with 3 feet lower, which isn't that, like I said, there's additional costs, but at least we would then be compliant with the building height. That's not the variance that, I think that one we can work around more. It's the second story setback that's the one that's key to offer the amount of square foot that we're seeking.
Okay. And the last question I have is, it's always a design choice as to which side of the lot you end up putting sort of the building. I'm curious about the rationale for it being on the north side. Is that a shading thing? Is it because of the existing tree in the front? What was the?
Yeah, that was all taken into consideration. It was the best placement. We had it placed in different ways, and we had different shapes, different modern designs. This was the one that was going to comply and be the least impactful on the neighbors.
Thank you. And very final question. It's hard to tell sometimes with an angle design when you do the streetscape, because it looks odd, right? You're sort of looking at windows at an angle, so you can't tell how big they look in real life if you were to stand there. But from the graphic on here, it looks very stark. There isn't much glazing facing the street, and so one of the aspects of a lot of, like St. Patrick in particular, is there is quite a lot of windows facing the streets along that street, and that's often seen as the eyes or the face of the buildings looking out. I'm just curious if that's modifiable, or if that was a design decision or just a structural
No, that's
requirement.
definitely modifiable. We want the same thing as well. Again, this kind of to come to the variance was just more for like some of these things can be, like the greenscape, the landscaping can be edited, and also with the windows and the designs, that's something that we can do with the staff level with Oak Bay here.
Okay, thank you very much. Further questions? I have Councillor Appleton, then Smart, and then we'll go to the public for additional comments and questions.
Thank
Go
you,
ahead.
Your Worship, and through you. Just because it's not broken down this way exactly in the plans, I see an overall, it's an overall building square footage rather than an individual unit square footage. But if I run the numbers here, I'm looking at about 40, if I don't include parking, I've got about 4,200 square feet, about 1,400 square feet per unit. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, approximately about that.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, to the applicant. I just wondered if you could just describe briefly how impactful it would be if the variance was granted for the second floor but not the third, if that would be, if you could just mention what the impact that would have on your project, or is it really crucial, the variance on the second and the third floor? Thank you.
Sorry, to understand that the second variance, like the building height, is how impactful that would be?
Sorry,
or just to lower the floor?
The variance for the interior side lot line setback for the second story and above, if the second story was allowed, but the third not. I'm just wondering if you could comment on.
Yeah, it would take away the square footage. Like we said, it's about 1,400 square feet right now per unit, and to avoid, if we don't get that second and third story setbacks, the units are going to go down to about 900 square feet. And so then think about trying to move in families with that much square footage. So we were trying to comply with the new guidelines, but the way that they're set up, this was like you almost have to ask for a variance because of that. Like we complied with the first story, but then the second and third need these, they need the setbacks to get the square footage that we were looking for.
I don't see other questions at this time, so at this point, thank you very much for your answers, and we'll probably have you back up here again to follow up on a couple of items. But at this time, we're going to welcome members of the public to come and talk to council about this particular application. I do want you to know, even though a lot of the correspondence came in towards the end of the day, I believe everybody has had a chance to read through the correspondence, and we really do appreciate your letters. We've certainly seen the ideas and concerns raised within those. But the same process as we had before. Thank you for being first.
One of many, maybe.
Same process. Just name, municipality of residence, and just ask you to keep your comments reasonably short. I'll let you know when if you go over 3 minutes, just so we want to give everybody a chance to speak. And again, I would just ask people not cheer or jeer anybody's point of view, because sometimes there's competing points of view on these things. We just want to make sure everybody feels welcome. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Sindra, and I'm in the municipality of Oak Bay. I am also the neighbor to the south of this proposed development. I assume you've all read all of the letters that we brought in. I would assume that took you all day. I received mine the afternoon of the 23rd, so that was Thursday afternoon. My birthday, actually. It was a great birthday gift. But anyways, I received it, so it was 1.5 business days to this. So as the head of Block Watch, I put out an APB and started delivering flyers and stuff like that. I think apart from all of the intricacies of law and all of the intricacies of planning, it was a shock to us all. It is an incredibly overbearing design. I'm really fearful for my neighbor losing the use and the enjoyment of her home, more so than mine. This is something that is going to impact if she lives there anymore. and that would impact me as well. Neighbors across the street have voiced the same. The lot size, I feel, is way too small to accommodate that. You will notice in the letters that there were solutions put forth by us as to what we felt could work, because we have these types of homes. I also wanted to bring up the heritage, the 2013 Heritage Gold One of Oak Bay, which is to keep the existing streetscape of Oak Bay in consideration for all new builds. St. Patrick is a historical, as is most of Oak Bay, and it's our Oak Bay. We're curious, and we do check with each other. The impact on light and also the impact on privacy is tremendous for my neighbor to the north. Having a big black wall outside my windows is not something I'm looking forward to. I also wanted to say that I know that there's a variance bylaw here which states if these variances do have some impact on the enjoyment of the property, regardless of what is put forth, that is up to council to make that decision. It has caused a huge uproar in our community. We're quite shocked, and I think to us it's not Oak Bay. And I'm sure because we are the guinea pigs and the new ones, I know that you'll probably come across this next door to you too. And I think there's a way to do it, to still have like a duplex with a basement suite. I think it can be in keeping with the looks of St. Patrick, and going below, yes, but I know it's a business, being a developer, strictly a business, but I think Oak Bayers would like to maintain what we bought into at great expense years ago, and have spent a lifetime wanting to be here. So, and we are very big contributors to our community. So that is what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next person, just come forward.
Hi. Hello. My name's Mari Todd. I'm a resident of Oak Bay.
Welcome.
I heard that because this is the first, and sort of looking forward to guidelines and things like that. I live in a 1,000 square foot home, 2 bedrooms, 1 bath. It's quite comfortable. And I think of the environment, and I think of, we've gone big. Everywhere we go big. Maybe it's time to fit within the space that we have. And if we've allowed that space to take up and support more in couples, families, then maybe this is the way of the new world, that we do have to minimize and go a little smaller going forward.
Thank you very much for your comments. Next, please. Figured out the process by now, I'm sure. It's name and municipality of residence, and welcome.
Thank you. My name is Ron Byer. My wife and I, Suzanne Reiser, reside at 2361 Rosario Street, approximately 200 feet from the proposed development. I would like to go on record that as a residential mortgage broker, I am keenly aware of the acute housing shortage, both here in Victoria and in Canada as a whole, and the BC government's drive for increasing our housing inventory to help alleviate this shortage through gentle densification. Our concern is that this proposed development is an attempt by the developer to push to the extreme the boundaries of densification intended to address our current housing needs. This development proposal certainly does not fit the definition of gentle densification. The scale and scope of this proposal is completely out of line with the size of the subject lot, and would be far more appropriate for a lot that would fall under what is now R4 zoning, formerly RS4, or the upper end of lot size for R5, RS5 zoning. The brutalist design presented by the developer only exaggerates this issue and it will stand out as an eyesore for the rest of the streetscape. I question why the developer wouldn't try to incorporate a design more in keeping with the architecture of the adjacent homes and the streetscape as a whole. The scale of this proposed development will also severely compromise the adjacent homeowners' pleasurable use of their properties. In the case of the property immediately north of the subject property, 798 St. Patrick Street, these homeowners will be deprived of their right to sunshine, and both adjacent properties will be deprived of their right to privacy given the number of windows that will overlook their properties, especially those from the third floor. Overall, we believe this proposed structure is completely out of scale for this lot, and as an imposing structure in comparison to other residences on St. Patrick, will only serve as a monument to development excess. We urge the Municipal Council to reject this development proposal and send it back to be redesigned with greater respect for the character of the neighborhood, and more specifically, the homes adjacent to the subject property. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. The next person up. Thank you.
So I've not done this before, and I'm really nervous too.
Sure. So it is completely normal to, I don't know why it's so imposing, but.
It's crazy, but I am nervous. Do I have to push this, or is it just on?
It's on now.
Okay.
You're welcome to speak.
So I have a lot of.
If this helps at all, the desk you're sitting at was Tommy Douglas's desk. He was his constituency office desk. So this was in Saskatchewan for many years. His constituents would come and chat with him. It was donated to us as a little public place. So it's going to be some warmth there attached to Tommy Douglas that you should feel.
So I have.
Sorry, just give your name and municipality.
I'm Desiree
Thank you.
Bukowski, and I'm at 836 St. Patrick Street. And I have a lot of concerns about what has hit us, as Sindra said. It's a shock to see this design 3 doors down. 3 floors. I walked out on my balcony today, and I can see from my balcony the tree that was not mentioned, the Garry Oak at the back of the proposed development, from my patio. If this goes up, my balcony will be in view of the 3rd floor. My neighbors at 824 St. Patrick, that home was renovated. In order to fit with the bylaws, they dug down so that they would not exceed the height. Their below grade backyard patio will definitely be impacted by 3rd floor windows. Also, our sunshine is going to be impacted, and I know how much impact that will have because my neighbors raised their house only a few feet and it had a significant impact on the sunshine in our yard. So I feel that in this case, someone is trying to jam 3 units on a lot that is not fit for 3 units. I have a home that is slightly smaller in square footage than these proposed townhomes, and it's all on 1 level. I can't imagine how much usable space you have if you have stairway and hallway one on top of another. It's my opinion that a duplex would probably be more suitable for a 6,000 square foot lot than a triplex. And if you can't fit 3 bedrooms in this space, maybe it's not suitable for those particular units. I'm very concerned about the precedent this sets. If you allow the lot setbacks, they've already been reduced, the 2nd and 3rd floor setbacks. I just want you all to imagine that 1.5 meters from your home, you've got a big black wall, because it can go anywhere. If they can be reduced here, they can be reduced in Harling Point, in Uplands, they can be reduced anywhere. And I think that most of us in Oak Bay have worked really hard. It was not easy to purchase in Oak Bay. It was with sacrifice. And we've worked really hard because we wanted a specific neighborhood. We wanted breathing space. We didn't want to be suffocated by an apartment building next door to us or a large complex next door to us. And that's why we moved into Oak Bay. And that's why our neighbors moved into Oak Bay. And that's why we have these close-knit communities. Trying to make sure I haven't missed anything. I'm sorry. I'm really pleading with you to not allow the variances that would allow for this particular construction. I think that it needs to go back to the drawing table, and that we need something that makes our street, that fits our street, that's more complementary, where we will welcome a development that is more in keeping with the homes on the street. And I just wanted to say that I know that our community has come under direct fire from the province, specifically Housing Minister Ravi Kahlon, who issued, a threat of, we're going to put somebody in here if you guys don't get building. And I appreciate the Mayor Murdoch has pushed back on that. But I'm really hoping that because the developer on this is the brother to the housing minister, I'm really hoping that that's not a pressure on you guys.
If it is, it's not a pressure.
I'm really hoping it's not. Thank you.
If you guys think
okay,
I'm
you can line up.
shaky, it's not, I'm not, I'm just angry. My name is Lynn Rubin.
Welcome.
I live in Oak Bay. We are immediately to the north of this development. And I sent in with my proposal some pictures. I want to say that we live in a beautiful one-bedroom 1911 heritage home. We and the previous owners have spent over $400,000 in the last 13 years to make it pristine and to make it fit with this area. We have an incredible garden, a mature English garden that will be totally destroyed if this is allowed to go ahead. I know that Oak Bay had these building heights, but they were put in place years ago in order to accommodate the peak roofs. They were not put in place for a flat roofed building, which in the end will look at our house and be 67 feet long, 33 feet high. And if you look at the pictures of the front of it with all the windows, that will face our bedroom, our master bedroom. In front of all of that is where all the cars will go, right in front of our master bedroom. This is not in keeping with Oak Bay. Now, had the developer wanted to do something that was, a two-level duplex, one floor house, one floor another house, and then put a nice roof on it, it would have been fine. But this is way overbuilt. This is a 50-foot lot. This is a lot that you may not know, but is built on a floodplain. And I have pictures, if anybody's interested, in how it floods. The ducks live there in the winter on that particular lot, 786. And it is not in keeping at all. It's not in keeping with your Oak Bay community plan at all. It doesn't even, they talk about gentle densification. This is like pushing in with a sledgehammer. It's not consistent with your brochure that I picked up here at City Hall the other day on infill housing, where it talks about that you're supposed to respect your neighbor. I have never in my entire professional career felt so disrespected. This will ruin that part of St. Patrick's. St. Patrick's is a historical street. Just Google it. You'll find out. It's a historical street, and this is going to just wreck it. That's all I have to say. Oh, just one quick correction, if I could, for those of you who may be interested. The notification was received, the earliest that anybody received it that I was aware of was Thursday. Thursday afternoon, when we got our mail, is when we received notice. 2 business days. Not enough time to get a group meeting going, not enough time to get, this would be, you'd have 10 times the people here if we'd been able to have some notice. There was no variation, there was no sign at the front of the property saying that something, that they were seeking any kind of changes to the bylaws. It was all kept very hush-hush, and in fact, I had to come in to get the information, and I only found out at first because the other neighbor on the other side got it. And she's going to be looking out her kitchen window at 4-foot patios. I think it's a disgrace. It's not a lot to be built with 3 plexes. Thank you.
Thank you for your thoughts, Ms. Rubin. You've tried a couple times to make it to the microphone, so I'll give you a chance now. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Neil Aldis. I'm going to sound like I'm repeating a lot of the things they said, but I feel like I should make my feelings felt. I'm also adjacent to this lot, but I'm directly west on Oliver Street. And I first have to address the notification. I got 0 notification. 0. So I didn't know about this until my neighbors told me about it. Now, I guess the thing I want to start with is the provincial housing. Obviously, the province wants to make affordable housing, which the developer alluded to. This kind of housing is not affordable. It's all it's going to do. You put more housing stock like this in Victoria, you get more people retiring here from other areas, and I don't consider this affordable housing, but it falls under his guidelines. I just feel that a small city lot like this is not the development to go on there. And I don't feel that there should be any variances on a lot like this. The building should accommodate the lot, not the lot accommodate a developer's plan. I guess that's all I got to say, except the fact on a personal level, as far as looking over my fence right now, that oak tree that was alluded to is actually on the property line. I think it started on my side of the property line, but over time has become so big that it actually, if you look at the plans, you'll see it there, and it actually straddles the line. So how they plan on fencing it, I don't know. And behind that, on the developer's property, is a line of cedar trees, which gives us a lot of privacy. And the privacy was also liked a lot by Sheila, the lady that lived in the house before she passed away. I tried to cut my side of the hedge one time, and she came over and started giving me a lecture about cutting her hedge, and I said, well, it's drooping down into my garden bed, so I'm cleaning it up. And we ended up on a good note, but she didn't like me cutting it, so she liked her privacy also. I look out my back window. We have a big window in our bedroom. I look out that back window and look at this beautiful oak tree right in the middle of my yard, and nice privacy with these cedars. And even with the privacy, that building, the whole 3rd floor is going to be looking into my backyard. One big wall, just like the rest of them said, and people looking down from the building into my backyard. And it's 21 feet from the property line. And it's also, if you've all seen the drawings, it's quite a bit higher than the lady's house to the south. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming and speaking. Other members of the public who wish to speak?
Yes, I'm allowed apparently.
Yeah, you're allowed. Yeah, absolutely. Please come forward.
Yes. I'm Keith Hutchinson.
Oh, you have to come and just speak into the microphone.
Yeah, one of these devices.
Oh.
There, am I live?
You are.
Thank you, Your Worship. My home is to the north of the property that's being developed.
Can you say your name is Mr. Hutchison?
I am a native of beautiful Oak Bay, yes.
Thank you.
For the record, I don't like to brag. And yes, Your Worship, I know of Tommy Douglas because I was forced to listen to his speeches when I was 14 years old. On radio, however. This is going to, obviously, from what the folks have said, going to impact seriously the neighborhood. We, that is my co-pilot and I, are not against affordable housing. This will not be, I think, technically affordable housing. It's infilling. We're not against infilling, but unfettered, pack them all together, is not infilling. What that is I can follow the money. This is a real estate transaction, and it's meant to max profit. I know this because one of my daughters is in the business, and she does max profit from what she's told me. And she's also, in a perverse sort of way, something for which I will not forgive her, has said, "Hey, Dad, I understand you're living next to the Motel 6, which I thought was really an unkind comment on her part. But I get the picture. We're not against the development. We're against the type of development. We're going to be left with a wall looking, and windows into our bedroom, and are they going to be disappointed? Because, well, I had to say that. I've always wanted to. Not much action, but, lots of windows. Okay, I'm moving on.
past that point.
And anyway, thank you. It was just after having heard the kind of support we're getting, I was gratified. So I can't be entirely cynical about the whole thing. And thanks for listening. It's not often that people have to listen to me. But thank you kindly.
Very much for coming out tonight and speaking. It's a hard act to follow. Anybody else wish to come forward? Yeah, people will come for a second time. I'm just going to give the courtesy of everybody to speak for the first time.
Hello, I'm Sally Hubbard, Oak Bay Municipality. I'm at 757 St. Patrick, diagonally across the road from this structure.
Welcome, Ms. Hubbard.
Thank you. As far as receiving notice, it was postmarked, the letter from Oak Bay, on January 13th. We didn't receive it until January 24th. Is that our postal service, or did it just sit in the mail room for a while? I don't know, but I received it on Thursday. So there we go for that. As far as the structure goes, well, I would imagine setbacks are put in place for a number of reasons, one of them being safety. If one of those three houses goes up in flames, all three are going to go with setbacks like this. Eaves troughs are almost going to be touching. So that removes the safety of a fire at one of these dwellings. It's a given. Three are going. It's predominantly concrete in the front. There's one long driveway and offshoots of further concrete for parking pads. What happened to the green space that Oak Bay is so proud of? It's gone. There are still birds and bees. There was no mow May, things like this that the municipality promotes and people try to abide by to continue having birds and flowers and trees and things growing. This obliterates that completely. If you have three homes here and they all decide to have a barbecue, that's 3 barbecues going at one time. If they all have a dog, that's 3 dogs barking at one time. If they all have their hoses going, that's an awful lot of runoff at one time. Oak Bay does have bylaws in place for noise. This is more than enough noise from one lot. If the wind is blowing the incorrect way, the poor neighbor on the other side and behind, and even myself across the road, is going to be subject to all of this barbecue, noise, etc. It's a diabolical looking build. It doesn't belong in the neighborhood. It looks, I used to live in Saudi Arabia. It looks like what we used to refer to and what they built, which was an adobe. Very few windows, just a big box. This isn't Saudi Arabia, and I don't want to live there again. And especially on my street, where I saved and I did everything that everybody else in this community did to have a home that was comfortable, relaxed, appealing, and amongst greenery. And that's pretty much all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you for coming out tonight, Ms. Hubbard. Any other first-time speakers? Oh, please come forward. Hello.
My name's Robin Winterbourne, and I live at 984 St. Patrick on the corner of McNeil and St. Patrick. and we're gardeners. And my biggest concern is all of the land we're covering up. In this particular, like all of us did just find out about 4 days ago. But what I want to know is where are the children going to play? There is no yard. They're going to play on their driveway, I guess, if these are family homes. And there could be a possibility of, I don't know, 12 children living there, possibly. And I'm concerned. I'm a retired teacher, and I think we need to start thinking about two things: yards, gardens. Somebody mentioned that Oak Bay is known for its beautiful gardens, and I noticed most of the new developments, there are no yards. You know, maybe that's the way people want to live now. They don't want a yard, or they have to take care of it. But literally, it's like a walkway around the house. And I don't know all about setbacks. I don't know the laws, but I'm just seeing the loss of the beautiful gardens of Oak Bay. So I really am begging you all that this is the start. And I know we're infilling, and I agree with it too, but it has to be on a level that still looks like Oak Bay. And that's the way I feel about it. And I just thank you guys for your jobs. I know it's a hard job. Thank you. One more concern: if it's true that the developer is related to the Minister of Housing, that is a question as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I will say, if it is true, it's not something we can consider as part of our variance consideration piece of this, but at the end of the day, we do have to consider, our job is looking at the merits or lack thereof of the variances to the bylaws, and that's the core essence of what we're looking at here. We don't restrict what other people talk about, but that is ultimately the issues that we have to deal with at this table. Yeah, they're the first time speakers.
A Mystery would like to speak on Zoom and she can't find the hand.
Oh, absolutely. If the person who's on AMISRI is online and wishes to speak, you are more than welcome to, yep, there we go. You've unmuted yourself. Just same process. If you could just state your name and municipality of residence, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Anita Mystery. I am from Oak Bay as well. Thank you for your time. I wanted to essentially say that, you know, in essence, we, my husband and I and my family, we support responsible development. You know, we've talked to our children about this development, and even our 25-year-old acknowledges, and he is one of the folks who can't afford to just go by in Oak Bay magically, that it is really important to have responsible development occur. However, the proposal is not really responsible or frankly respectful to the community. While I've submitted a letter that speaks to the neighborhood character, height variance, you know, privacy, light, so on, one of my concerns is that the applicant, the developer, noted that he is able to follow the variance, you know, within the variance, it doesn't require a variance, but would prefer not to. And so that sort of makes me go, well, we have bylaws, and I would appreciate the bylaws being followed. You know, as a member of the community, you know, we talked about the street design or the street view, and the fact that there would be triangles, but it makes no difference from the front when you're looking at the house from the street. And that's your community. We walk along the streets. We have sidewalks. One of the reasons many of us live in the neighborhood is to hang out with our neighbors and really appreciate being part of a community where you walk around and chat and hang out. The proposed design is really just too large for the lot size. You know, I've in conversation with my some of my peers who live in the neighborhood, some of my neighbors. You know, one of my comments is that it's just because we can doesn't mean we should, right? There is a way to increase density. There is a way to be gentle in our approach and to have it fit within the character of the community without taking a let's stretch this as far as we can and see what we get approval for type of approach, which is what this is feeling like, to be very frank. I'll leave it there, and I thank you all for your time. You know, like my predecessor, it's nice to have the mic. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for flagging that, Ms. Ree. And for anybody else online who wishes to speak, if you're on the Zoom form or on the Zoom app, you can use the reactions tab, and that's where you can raise your hand in the app to let us know that you wish to speak. There's also a 1-855 number on the agenda if you're listening or watching the live stream. And in that you can hit, make sure I get it right, it is *9. It's not #9, it is *9, and that raises your hand with the 1-855 number. I think we're probably getting closer to the end of people in the room, so I want to make sure anybody who's online who wishes to speak does take the opportunity at this time before we come back to the council table. Before I go to...
has a hand up too.
No, we're okay online at the moment, I think, so.
I just wanted to add one thing.
Oh, I'm gonna come back to second-time speakers in a second. I'm gonna make sure we have a chance for all first-time speakers to speak. Does anybody else wish to speak to council at this time? This is the public opportunity for input. I will go back then for second-time speakers here briefly. You had your hand up first, and then I'll come back over here. Go ahead. If you just state your name again for the record, just so we have it for our minutes. It saves our
Yes,
staff a
sorry.
lot of time and energy.
Keith, this is not a competition. I'm fourth generation Oak Bay, fifth generation Victoria, so been here a long time.
So just your name again, just for the record.
Mari Todd.
Thank you.
My girlfriend came over the other day, having thankfully received the personal mail-outs. She scolded me. She said, oh, you live in Oak Bay. You have to come up, you've got to start doing your part. Well, we went for a walk, and she said, oh my God, no. So that was her reaction. I'm not fully educated, I'm sorry, on the mandates. Do we just get housing? Is it houses or housing? Are we mandated by number of bathrooms, by number of bedrooms? Are we mandated by all of those things? And I understand, Oak Bay has opened its doors to increased infill, and that's great, but we don't have to do, especially what this is proposal for this lot. I'm assuming. There was one more thing. I'm sorry, I will do my homework, but this project basically brings in 2 more houses. There's already one there, so it brings in 2 more. I'm not sure what the bylaws or the changes have been to allow laneway houses, things like that. What are we mandated by size? Any of those things, and again, I'll get back to my environmental. This is removing and dumping, hopefully recycling as much as possible of one home and creating massive, from my perspective, 3 massive homes. We could leave, I'm sure there's many people who would like to build something out back. Leave everything as is and build 2 new little places, and it would satisfy what's being done here. So those are my comments.
Thank you very much. For those, just because I think despite all of the news and things like that, there has been just the highest level. We are required on all lots to essentially, in Oak Bay, they're pretty much all required to have a minimum of 4 units per lot. In our efforts, and we did our best to get some good advice in terms of what was possible, to try and keep things reasonably within the sort of look and feel of Oak Bay, but 4 units per lot is substantial. And they need to be viable, and so that comes into it. We did, if anything, weigh things as best we could to people adding on to existing houses, either adding onto the house or adding laneway houses. But there are ultimately up to every homeowner or landowner their choice as to how they want to make any modifications, if any, on those lots. So that's been the path that's got us here. Definitely not required to have number of bathrooms or anything of that nature. The big picture housing target orders do have asks for the number of certain types and styles of houses, affordable housing, etc. At this point, we're just still early on in it, that we're really just looking at the raw numbers in terms of units. So the comment made that we've gone from 1 to 3 is correct. There would be net 2 new units on this particular lot. Second time speakers again, please. No, welcome back.
Thank you very much. Lynn Rubin again. We live immediately north to this development. I just wanted to tell everybody in our wonderful little heritage cottage house, our square footage is smaller than one of these ones that's being built. And that's just the nature of the quaintness of Oak Bay, and I wouldn't want that to be lost. This particular unit is being proposed on the wrong area, and I think it's time that we have to stand up, because this is just would devastate. Well, it would certainly devastate us, but it would devastate the whole thing. The shade that this would cast off onto many houses, and the view would be just so out of place because it's the wrong lot. It's only 50 feet, and it's next to 2 existing homes. Thank you.
Thank you. Please come forward. I do want to get back to this table at some point so we can start to look at some directions for next steps.
Yeah, my name
Please
is.
welcome.
Sorry, my name is Ted David, live at 543 St. Patrick. Everything that I feel has already been said tonight, but the one thing on this last weekend, my wife and I went for a drive. We went out to Langford, Millstream area. And do you know what it's like to come back into Oak Bay, and especially Oak Bay? You go from the other municipalities, and when we come back into Oak Bay, it's like a breath of fresh air. It's relaxing, it's home. This whole development, like I say, everything's already been said, but it would be the beginning of the end in our area. South Oak Bay is special. Don't ruin it. You have a chance. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to seek any other first-time speakers before I have to. You can come forward. Move this along as quickly as I can.
Sally at Oak Bay Municipality. What is considered price-wise affordable housing?
It's a good question. There's multiple definitions. This would not be looked at. This is market housing. This is not affordable housing.
Okay.
I think term is often used in the sense that townhomes, even if the same square footage, tend to be cheaper than a standalone single-family home, but it does not make it affordable. It just makes it a more affordable option for equivalent numbers of bedrooms, is typically how it's referred to. So in this case, it's market, whatever the market will bear.
So this is the developer getting as much as he can out of the space, basically, and making as much as possible.
Well, I can't speak for their final pricing models, but it's not affordable housing in a sense. Yeah, typically below market requires some public land or some other public investment to make it affordable. This is not one of those. This is a private property with private development. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Please.
First in and last out, I don't know. I just want to say quickly that when I moved into my home, the very first thing I did was I put 2 red chairs outside my front door. And people used to say, well, why did you do that? Because people can see you. And I said, no, I can see them. And I am constantly out there, and people come and grab their coffee from Delish, and I have extra chairs for my neighbors to sit outside with me. And we have a wonderful time. I'm very inclusive with my neighbors. I'm afraid that would end. I really do. And it would be overshadowed by this behemoth next to me. And I also want to say that the new build Casey's, yes, it's big, but it's in keeping still. And, you know, I'm grateful for that. And I'm looking forward to seeing what it will have offered to community. But I just love the fact that my neighbors walk by, we chat on the sidewalk, we talk on the driveway. I don't think that is conducive. The new build is conducive to what we have. And I just wanted to mention that. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Yeah, it's a question. Please come forward. We want to make sure we get all the questions out at this time so we May I address them,
Sorry,
please?
Mari
No?
Todd, again.
Welcome, Ms. Todd.
Again, haven't done my homework. Are the fees requested of this infill extra square people per square footage? Infrastructure, are there extra fees for infrastructure for this kind of build?
So the short answer is yes. There's all municipalities have the option of implementing what they call development cost charges or community amenity charges. They've changed, and those they are only reflect actual direct impact costs of a new development. So going from a 1 to a 3, it's essentially that share of those 2 units on the broader infrastructure requirements for, say, the street to upscale requirements as it grows. So it's not hundreds of thousands of dollars, but it's a substantial amount of money still that helps us with our infrastructure impacts.
Thank you for the education.
Thank you. Oh. We have one online here. I see Rowan Reyna. If you can unmute yourself and introduce yourself.
Hi, yes. My name's Rowan. I'm a member of the community. I'm also a younger member. I'm 25. I think my mom spoke earlier. And I just wanted to echo some of the concerns and some of the points she raised. You know, as a younger member of the community, I'm acutely aware of how important, additional housing is. But I think that, additional development needs to be done responsibly. And I don't know if this is conducive with that goal. I think quite simply, the project might be too big for the lot size, as some of the councillors have mentioned. And we can still maintain, three units, possibly having 2 3-bedroom units and 1 2-bedroom unit. I think that also is in line with the developer's goal of building family-oriented housing. Part of that is, also creating space for smaller families and having like more entry-level price points. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Reyna. Coming back into this room, is there anybody else who wishes to speak with us before we come back to our table for further discussion? Please come forward. It's been a while since we've had this many people to speak to an application, so I'm not sure that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I'm not surprised anytime it's a first, and this is definitely a first with the new regulation, so welcome.
Yeah, I'll be quick. I'm Molly Lawler. I'm in Oak Bay. So I think, we're the majority of what's been shared, I'm in agreement with. I think Oak Bay is a treasure, it's a gem. We moved here 4 years ago, specifically hoping to be in this neighborhood, worked hard to get in here. I agree, we need to densify in some way to diversify the housing stock, to allow families to come in, to allow people who have been here a long time to be able to downsize and stay in their neighborhood. I think it's all important. What I'm concerned about is the work that went into creating these bylaws and the thoughtful approach of, going to the community and doing the walks and all these things, to have these variances come up so quickly before the community has a chance to actually experience and live with some examples being built in the community and see what is the actual impact of this, I feel would be irresponsible to go forward and start just sort of throwing these rules out the window and allowing this large build on a relatively small lot, which is clearly not, in keeping with the neighborhood aesthetic. I think it would be troubling. So that's all I wanted to say, and I just would ask that you consider the neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lawler. Anybody else who wishes to talk to council at this time? I don't see any other hands either online or in person, so at this point, thank you very much to all the people who spoke. I know it's sometimes awkward to come forward and speak in these things, so appreciate that, and certainly to the many more people who did write into us. We have had a chance to look at those submissions as well. I'll now close the public input portion of this, back to this table. Are there any additional questions? Maybe I'll ask the applicant to come forward. I'm sure there's some additional questions that may have come up out of this. I'll come back to it, I think. So I have Councillor Patterson, Braithwaite, and Watson.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. We did hear a lot of people talk about privacy issues, and I'm wondering if the developer could talk about what consideration had been given to for privacy, both for the proposed units and for the adjacent dwellings?
Again, that's why we did take that into consideration, and that's why some of the comments that have come up are windows in which to offer privacy. If we try to maximize the amount of privacy that could be offered by pivoting them to the side, so you're not looking directly into individual units, to the neighbors, I should say. Sorry, that's why we pivoted it and try to offer up the least amount of direct contact through the window to window.
Sorry, I have Councillor Braithwaite and then Watson.
Thanks very much. Actually, just this is just staff, because somebody brought up the fact that there was no sign in front of the property explaining what was being proposed. And I wonder if staff could just touch on when we actually do put signs up and why there was no sign put up at this property.
Mr. Green.
Through your worship, the district's application procedure bylaw only requires signage when somebody has submitted a rezoning application or an amendment to the official community bond. There is no sign required for a development variance permit or development permit.
And just, if I can, just when we have something called an Oak Bay Development Tracker, which some of you in the room may not know about, but you probably are going to be very aware of now. And I'm just wondering if Mr. Green, you could tell us when an application like this would go up on the Oak Bay Development Tracker.
Mr. Green.
Through your worship, yes. My understanding, as soon as an application is deemed complete by staff and soon as we receive the payment, then that application will go onto our development tracker and we then send referrals out. Yeah.
It was put on
And
January 22nd.
Sorry. And so, that was my next question was, if it's put on the development tracker, then how soon after it's put on the development tracker does it normally then go in the flow to come to council?
Green.
Yes, so we have obviously a number of applications that get submitted to the district, and so there is essentially a queue of applications, and those applications are managed accordingly by the planning team in relation to how complex. Obviously, some more complex applications take longer. Those that are more straightforward in nature can move forward more quickly. It also depends on sometimes the comments that we receive from internal departments. If there is comments that we get back from internal departments, that also may determine the next steps with that application. If there are no comments, then that generally means that we can then write up the staff reports to present those applications to council.
Thank you, Councillor.
And then lastly, just because it sounds like there's some confusion as to when this was actually put on the tracker, do you have any idea when this application was put on our Oak Bay Development Tracker?
Mr. Green.
Through your worship, I don't. I'd have to go back and determine that through looking at our software, I guess, to determine when that was actually posted. But that's my understanding, is when the application is deemed complete, when the application is paid for, then it would automatically go on our tracker. But
thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Mayor, and my question is for staff, please. Mr. Green, this is for you. I just want to go back on your response to Councillor Braithwaite's questioning about signage, and just for the public and for my understanding, I know that when we have upland siting and design permit applications, there is signage. Often those include DVPs. Is it the upland siting and design requirement that triggers the sign? So, yeah, okay. I just wanted the public to understand. They see these signs and they wonder, well, is that really what's going on?
Mr. Green.
yeah, through your worship, in Uplands, site and design applications are under the Uplands Regulation Bylaw, under the Special Powers Act, and therefore within the Uplands Regulation Bylaw there is a requirement that applicants place a sign on the property notifying the public that there is an active, I think it says active building permit actually on their sign, which is what the regulation requires.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that, because it's under a different set of regulations that's required. My question about this particular application has to do with parking. And I'd like to know what the proponent has suggested, at least in this initial plan, is 3 covered spaces and 1 uncovered space. What is the minimum required number of spaces under our new requirements? Am I correct in thinking it would be 2 covered spaces for this proposal?
Green?
Yeah, through your worship, I believe it's 0.5 per unit. Can't remember if there was I'd have to double check the bylaw, see if there's a visitor parking requirement. I don't think so. I think it's just 0.5 per unit is my understanding. That bylaw was changed in June of last year.
Thank you. That's my only question.
Thank you. Councillor Smart?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, to staff, to Mr. Green. I'm wondering, with regards to some of the neighbors' concerns about lot coverage and loss of green space, it appeared that this application showed that this project was under 30% lot coverage, which is similar to a typical single-family build. I just wanted to clarify the lot coverage and address the concern of loss of green space.
Mr. Green?
Thanks.
Just maybe sure to give the applicant, just maybe turn the microphone off in front of you, because it limits us to the number of ones that can be on simultaneously. Thank you.
Yeah, through your worship, the proposed lot coverage is 29% and the bylaw allows 30%, so they are under the lot coverage requirement, or the minimum, under the maximum requirement.
Please continue.
Thank you. My other question through you, Mayor, to staff, was just with regards to, there was comment at this table and then echoed in the audience with regards to that we had reduced the side yard setbacks just recently and now we're considering it again. I just wondered if staff could clarify the change in setbacks that occurred in June versus what we had before. Thank you.
Mr. Green?
Through your worship, there were no changes to interior side lot line. The interior side lot line has always been 1.5 metres and the second story setback has always been 3 metres. The 2 changes that were made in June of last year where somebody's building 3 or 4 units was a reduction of the front yard setback from 7.6 metres to 7.62 metres to 6 metres, and then a change to the rear, which I need to just look at my bylaw to determine what that change was.
I believe it went from 25% to just 25
Yeah,
feet.
so 7.6 metres, but there used to be a 7.6 metres or 25% of the lot, therefore whichever is greater. That was deleted.
Right. Thank you. Any other questions? I'm just going to have a question for the applicant on this one, because there was just some questions around the yard space, and I think you suggested that there's still some work to do, perhaps on the side patio space, but at the rear of the building, there is some green space there allocated. Is that intended to be sort of shared yard space at the back of the lot? It's not entirely clear what, there's a detailed plan here, but just conceptually when you're in your development, do you have a thought for what that back green space
Yeah, it's going to
would
be a shared green space. The stuff on the back is going to be more private for the individual units, but the rest of the green space is going to on the property is going to be shared.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I think all my other questions have been sort of asked of the applicant or staff. So at this point, back to this table, happy to seek some direction from council. I can start us off easy if you wish. We can have a motion to receive the report. Thank you. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? Unopposed? We have now received the report. That's the easy part of this job. I'm looking forward to it. I don't usually make motions, so I'll turn to members of council. Councillor Watson? Yeah, or I'd probably seek a motion if we have the willingness, because I do think that it's worth us talking to something as opposed to just talking in generalities. But I can't force that, so if you want to make some general comments, you're welcome to as well. Go ahead, Councillor Watson.
No, I'd be happy to start with a motion that we deny the variances. And through our, well,
Second.
yeah, that's where I'm starting.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you for the motion. As course of yes, I think in this intent, thing, it's obviously not good enough to my mind to just say no. So helpful for the applicant if that's the will of council, and we'll see if that is. At least there's some clarity about what the ask would be for it to come back and have some success. So please, over to you, Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Mayor. So yes, I'd like to motivate around that motion. And, just first speaking at the highest level, we have just approved a new regulatory regime that we were required to do, and we did it with lots of input from the community and very good technical input to help us figure out how we might be able to accommodate what we were required to do in the particular context of Oak Bay. And one of the speakers and writers made the point that it would be a little premature, and I agree with her, to actually start allowing variation from that before we actually see what the outcomes can be, sticking to the rules that we have just made. And I think that alone would be justification to ask this applicant to come back with a scheme that actually meets the requirements, to see what actually is possible. I do feel that we only have a few tools to try and sort of nudge outcomes in the way that the community may really want. And I do want the public to be aware that there are a lot of things that we have decided not to do. We did not choose to put all of these applications through design review. So we have, at least under the current regime, given away those tools, but we still have some ones that, if worked within, will change the outcome of what the applicant has brought forward now, and hopefully to address some of the concerns that he is hearing from the community. Clearly, this infill doesn't happen unless there are willing investors. But it is actually a community that is being invested in, and for even those who arrive, they want to feel part of that community and incorporated. So, as Councillor Green said earlier, just better engagement with the neighbours about what might happen on this site within those strictures, I think would be time very well spent. And I was pleased to hear that the members of the community saying, and I do believe them, it's not that they're against more things happening in their neighborhood to bring in alternative, different models of housing. But this particular proposal has, by its very nature, is asking to push the limits of what we've agreed to, and I don't think that's the right place to start.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Braithwaite.
Thank you very much. Yeah, and thanks to everybody who came out to speak tonight and who wrote letters. I mean, we had 64 pages of letters to go through today, and that was quite a lot to read, but it was a lot of really good information. And there was a few little things that I kind of took from those letters as well. But from tonight, I would say that some of the things that I heard would be, building to accommodate a lot and not a developer's plan. That's very important. I think that the other thing is, for me, I think probably 2 units on this lot would be a better fit, and it would still garner a fair profit to the developer. It might be considered housing diversity, but really for me, it's too much density on this lot at this time. And again, going back to what we have all spoken about, that we just changed our bylaws. We need to see what those bylaws bring about before we start accepting changes to those bylaws we just changed. It's going to be interesting to see what we can garner from a developer who wants to come forward and fit within the bylaws that we have just put out. So the other thing is, just looking through what I have here, I think that the proposal just doesn't fit in with what most of us would consider gentle densification. I don't consider it gentle densification. I'd like to see, as I said, the developer come back with a proposal that fits in with our current bylaws. On one of the letters, it said that the housing plan should be for future residents, should not come at a cost for current residents. And I truly believe that. And I think that to allow something like this to be built at this time is not fair to our current residents. Our current residents have, as Councillor Watson said, agreed that we should have gentle densification within our neighborhoods. I truly believe that. However, this is not, in my humble opinion, gentle densification. It's something that, to me, takes up far too much of the lot. This is a 50-foot lot. It could be something that we could have a much smaller footprint on. We could have a duplex on there that still could have 2 suites in the basement. You could actually have 4 families on there. And so I think that for me, that's why I seconded the motion, because I want to see something come back to us that we can embrace and that does fit in the bylaws that we have put forward. So again, thank you to everybody for coming out. I think, I hope that the proponent hears what we're having to say and will be able to come back to us with something that would be more fitting for this lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. I do want to point out that we should be speaking to the variances here. The density of the lot is set in law. There's up to 4 units. We're not concerned with that. We're really here speaking to the merits of the variances, and so that's my only guidance there. I can't. Go ahead, Councillor Green.
Thank you. And through you, I also appreciate all the neighbors coming out this evening. I appreciate the applicant coming as well. It's not easy to sit in a room where, there's a lot of emotion, and thank you for that. I made notes as people spoke, so I tried to put something together. If you don't mind, I'll just read it. Housing development should build community, not divide it. But the anxiety and concern tonight over this proposal is very real, and these neighbors are passionate about their own homes and their neighborhood, and they support responsible infill. When we crafted our new bylaw, which is only 7 months old, to conform to provincial regulations, we tried to incorporate the values this community truly cares about and identified during consultation. The preservation of green space, tree canopy, reducing overlook and intrusion, parking consideration, neighborhood streetscape, and heritage. And I guess my question for all of us is, are we building homes or just units? I believe a home is a community, a part of a community, and it builds a sense of place and belonging, and I think these are important principles. No consultation with neighbors and neighborhood is a concern of mine. I grant you it's not required in this case, but I just think it's best practice to sit down with neighbors to talk about developments like this. I also would not like to set a precedent for a bylaw that is so new. And a planner said to me recently, how we infill is critical, particularly for Oak Bay, because it is a different kind of community. It does have a unique housing component. I don't know if I could just say that perhaps these variances wouldn't be required if one considered another option, such as a duplex with 2 basement suites, which in fact would provide 4 units of housing, not just 3. And finally, I appreciate all of the input. I appreciate staff's time, but I think this can be a lot better. And let's try and respect and honor the values and the things that people are truly concerned about, because we want infill to be successful in Oak Bay.
Are you done, Councillor Green? Sorry.
Pardon me?
Are you done?
I am.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. I don't have anything
Oh, sorry.
else on my... I have Councillor Appleton and then Smart. I'm happy. Any order matters, but go ahead, Councillor Smart.
Thank you. I will be supporting the motion on the table, but I did want to go over just a few of the things that were mentioned during the meeting. I mean, nobody wants to see a project that tears a neighborhood apart. And I'm empathetic to the stress and the concerns that the neighbors have brought forward. And I also am a big fan of community engagement with projects. I do want to jump from that, though, and say that I do think it's so positive that we had this applicant come and work with our staff and really work hard to try to find something that worked on this site. And I think that's not a small thing. And I also appreciate them coming to the table now, in a sense, with a question and at an early stage in the project. And what I hear from the applicant is a real willingness to want to make a great project. And so I just want to acknowledge how this project could have gone right to building permit, cut some corners. And what I hear from the applicant is that they actually want to do this right. And so I'm very hopeful for what this project will become. I wanted to touch on a few of the things that this project does well, so they're not lost potentially going forward. And one of them is the issue of sunshine that's been brought up a few times. And I acknowledge this is a taller building that will, in the morning, shade the neighbor's backyard. But looking at it from the big picture of what it could have been, there could have been an accessory dwelling unit in that backyard that actually would have provided more shade to the neighbor's garden to the north. So I think that we have to acknowledge the fact that in this project there are front and rear yards and lots of green space. And so there are some positives to that. I also want to acknowledge the shape of the building not being a complete wall to the neighbors and providing some variation with windows that don't look directly at the neighbors. And so there has been a look at privacy as well. And so I just want to point out some of the things in this project that have obviously been considered that I would hate to see lost in a future rendition. I want to acknowledge that with the height, I would be amenable to seeing a little bit of a height variance come back, and I would hate the project going forward to, in a sense, try to so strictly stay to no variances, and I'd rather want to suggest that I would love to see it be open to just the best project, and if that meant, that the first and third floors were reduced to 8 feet and just the main floor to 9. And there was still a 7-inch variance because this site floods. And that was just the best project. I would want to see that come forward. And also if the project developed to a more traditional design and it required more variances, I guess I would just say that I'm open to seeing the best project come back, even if that is not entirely without variances. Yeah, when I see a project like this, I guess I look at how could this project be better? And I think some of those points have come up during this meeting, and I see that as the success of the conversation that we've had around the table so far. And I think the biggest one that I've heard is really with regards to that third floor, and the third floor not having any setback or form that is mitigating. So I just want to end by saying I'm really hopeful of what this project will become. I think there are some really good considered elements to the project, and I think that what I hope and what I'm hearing around the table is, and from our neighbors, is that it would be really great if this was a good neighborhood fit. And how could we take this project and bring it towards a better neighborhood fit? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Smart. Councillor Appleton?
Thank you, Your Worship. So speaking against the motion on the floor, not because I'm in favor of approving the permit, but I would have preferred a motion to refer back for amendments. I think that there are quite a few. I think that there are, the concerns from the neighborhood are well understood and well heard, and I think that the concern around implementing a variance on a brand new bylaw is also valid. I think that there are elements of as Councillor Smart has alluded to, there are core components of this development that I think could potentially work in the case of an amendment. One of the things that was, so with respect to providing input to the applicant, the design of the building taken in such a way to reduce overlook, I think, is significant. As people have talked to us about infill, they have raised concerns about how larger buildings, because that is what is coming. There will be larger buildings under the new bylaw. There will be larger form and larger massing just because of the nature of existing buildings in Oak Bay. Overlook is something that people have raised for us. So the design has a degree of creativity around it to try to minimize that overlook. The other thing that I want to point out here that's a little bit lost in this discussion is the 3-bedroom design as well. And the developer has pointed this out, and it is not necessarily insignificant. It's both a prescription in our housing needs assessment, and 3-bedroom units are sorely lacking across the region, and they do perform an important role in making accessible spaces for families. It is a very particular type of, like I say, it's an underserved form. And what I hear the community talking about, I guess I contrast the degrees of opinion on these types of units. I will hear folks there will be a resistance to putting in a multi-unit building that will have primarily 1-bedroom or smaller units in it, with the idea that these will not support families. We also need to look at those types of designs which will support families and which will accommodate families. So I appreciate the effort that's been put into being thoughtful about creating a 3-bedroom unit. It doesn't address an unfulfilled need across the region. And I would just like to point out that, again, 4 units or dwelling units are allowed by right on every residential lot in Oak Bay at this time. So there will be greater density. There will be larger structures infill into these types of neighborhoods. So I would really like to see a design of similar nature with modifications to reduce the height, to potentially address the second floor overlook pieces, to potentially reduce floor heights to 8 feet to potentially address some of those issues. Rather than rejecting outright, I would have liked to have seen an iterative design process to go back to the applicant. I think the applicant has heard a lot of input here. I do hope that we see revised material come back, and I do appreciate everybody taking their time to provide their input. But there are, once those considerations and once the concerns have been addressed and those concerns are valid, there are some design elements and there are some components of this proposal that the community can benefit from. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. I just want to make sure I'm clear on process here, because I sort of take these variances applications as we can either approve them as they are or we can decline them with clarity to come back. And it's hard for us. We can't, I think, procedurally say, give conditional approval if something has changed, right? We essentially have to give a yes or a no, but we're using this tool to give some feedback as to what might come back. I just want to make sure I'm just curious if there is a model here where we can is it appropriate to refer it back to staff I'm hearing nobody on council saying we don't want to see anything like this. We're getting some feedback in terms of some of the specifics of what would make it successful. So I'm just going to turn to staff in terms of is the motion on the floor essentially appropriate? And if some changes were made, the application can still come back with modifications to address the concerns raised. Mr. Green?
Yeah, through the chair, but I believe that council has 3 options, I guess. One, to approve the variance, deny the variance. They could approve one or both of the variances, or refuse both the variants, or they could also, might understand that council has broad but not unlimited discretion with regards to DVPs, and therefore the application could be referred back to staff to address certain issues as long as that sort of direction is clear in relation to what those changes are or what those issues that need to be resolved for it then to come back. I believe that is that council has that prerogative.
Okay, thank you. I'll leave it to council. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Appleton.
Just for clarity, Your Worship, the motion that I heard was as per option 3 in the staff report, to deny the permit, not to refer the application back to seek amendments.
Fair. I take that point. At this point, the motion is to decline, but I'll go back to staff on this one. In past practices, we've had motions to decline with some clarification as to what would be some suggestions of coming back. Where we've referred it, I think in my experience, and maybe I'm just wrong on this one, so please correct me, where there's been like sort of one element that we wanted to just say change this and then come back, that we've used the referral more for that kind of a specific ask on one item or two small items. But I just want to make sure, I just want to allow this to work to go back and come back to this table again with us giving as much feedback as we can. So whatever the best process is for that, I'll take it. But Mr. Green?
Yeah, for your worship, yeah, it's my understanding that you could refer it back to staff to work with the applicant to address certain issues that may be of concern to council.
Okay, thank you. Well, that's not the motion on the floor, so I'll take that from council if they wish to turn down this application and go to a motion to refer. I will say if it does pass, then I think we need to, expect the applicant to work with staff to come back with some.
And sorry, just to elaborate a little bit, there is also the option of deny it and then being clear why the application is denied as well to encourage a new application to come forward is also a reasonable ask as well.
Thank you. And procedurally, I would normally do that if there was a clear message as to what one specific thing was. I would probably go that route, but ultimately up to council. Councillor Patterson, and then I'm going to.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and I will support the motion that was put forward. But I thank everyone that came out tonight, and I do want to thank the applicant for the comments on how they tried to adapt the proposal to make the best use of the lot and provide quality housing for infill in Oak Bay. And I think the applicant did refer to some changes that could be made themselves, things like reducing the top floor height to 8 feet instead of 9. I also liked the willingness to look at perhaps not having the visitor parking spot in there, reducing some of the paving, increasing the green space. So, but it is early days since we did adopt as a council the new regulatory framework, and I think we have to allow it a chance to play out so that we get applications that are as close to it as we can get to see what that offers. And I think the applicant actually had some ideas on how that could be achieved. So I am very hopeful that with what the applicants heard tonight, that they will work with staff and perhaps come back modifying this so that it fits within the framework of our policies. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Before I go to second-time speakers, Ms. Williams.
Hi, thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to jump in and provide some clarification. So council has the authority to approve or deny the application. If you deny the application, the applicant will have to go make a new application, pay new fees to bring it back. You do have the option to refer it back to staff to work with the applicant if you're clear on what pieces of this that you want changed for it to be brought back, and it would be considered under the same application.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. I think the clarity of direction might be a little tricky at this table, but I'll open it up for suggestion. Like if people wish to either defeat this motion or it's hard to amend it because I think those are maybe slightly different motions. But I'll speak briefly to the motion on the floor. My intention here is to have this go back for staff and the applicant to work on it. I'm supportive of the motion, at least the intention. But I want to this will be a bit repetitive for some of the things that were already said, but I'll try and make it brief. I do think that the applicant is they've looked at what they think is a valuable housing form for the community. I think there is value in, there could be, 4 1 or 2 bedroom units versus 3 bedroom units. There are, that's ultimately we need a mix in the community. And so I don't mind. I do appreciate the fact that this is the direction taken on this. I also want to acknowledge it's a difficult site. As I think the neighbors have pointed out, it's a 50-foot lot, not a 60-foot lot. That makes these housing forms difficult. But I also I do appreciate that this is not a cookie cutter, off the shelf, square box approach to this model. Working within challenging sites is difficult, and I do believe that the applicant has made an effort to try and accommodate that within there. I think that the angling is a net positive. When I was going through this, I'm a big believer in the second story setback. I think, for clarity, the setbacks are compliant on the first floor, but we have a second and third story setback, and that intention is sort of a number of reasons, but not least of which is to create some corridors of light between buildings and make the community feel more airy, and allow more space between houses. But I do, in this case, I think the way the things are angled, where it's just the points of the building that are intersecting in that, I thought was a thoughtful. It wasn't an unreasonable ask overall, given the constraints. I think, and it reduces that sort of the big wall effect on neighbors. It's not ideal for the neighbors, I'll say that, but it's a big building, so that's the nature. I do think that I struggle with the ask of the building height. I think that is a direct massing feel for a community, and that's where, when you're walking down the street, if you're the neighbor beside it, just that extra couple of feet at the tallest point, that's where it really sort of hits home. I think probably the drawings in many ways were hurt by the fact that there's sort of a black wall as opposed to a shingled wall, light colored and things, because it feels like a very big piece, but it does make it very clear sort of what the massing and the glazing and things are as part of that. At this point, no, we have a motion on the floor, so my apologies. I should have given you the opportunity before we got to this point, but yeah, so those are my things. Overall, I don't think it's that far off of being a successful application. I think that to Councillor Smart's point, I do think there has to be a little bit of a give on this one. I think like smaller roof ceiling heights in one or two of the floors to just to accommodate the height pieces. I'd be amenable to a slightly taller roof height just to give a more of a peaked feel to it, because it doesn't have again the same sense of massing on pieces. But I think the building height, the wall height, is really that piece that really has an impact on neighbors and the community. So those are my sort of very specific feedback on the application. Again, I think as we're contemplating these, I think it is difficult for council to say yes to variances on a new bylaw. We're still trying to test these pieces out, and so I'm supportive of the motion. But I do want to acknowledge that on difficult lots, this is a flat lot, everything else, but it's still a reasonably small lot, that I think some creative architecture and design is welcome. My greatest fear with this zoning is that we're going to be seeing cookie cutter, off the shelf square units that maximize every square inch and just get plopped down, and that's not what this is. But I think just a little articulation of the roof line, some of those little small pieces, that could be quite attractive and fit in quite nicely. So that's my feedback on this. It's close to my mind, but not there yet. So that's the feedback from council. But I think I heard some requests here that we might change, that someone might wish to change. But Councillor Smart, I saw your hand first.
Well, thank you. I just wanted to voice hearing staff's clarification on going ahead with option 2 and potentially referring it back to staff and hearing more of the details of that I won't be supporting the motion because I would be more in favor of option 2. Thanks.
Right, Councillor Appleton, I saw your hand as well, and then Councillor Green. Did I see your hand?
Thank
Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just for clarification, the motion on the floor is to deny the permit. So it is not an iterative design process. And I want to be clear that if the vote for that motion on the floor is for this to be rejected, it is not a vote for to take away for consideration. It cannot be brought back for 6 months if it's rejected, as I understand it, right? Or no, we're talking about DVPs.
It can be brought back as long as there's a material change to the application.
Yeah. So that's not. If the vote is for option 3, then it's a vote to deny, not for an iterative process. So if the intent is to provide feedback to the applicant, option 3, the motion on the floor, is not that. So I'm just making that clear. And so if there is an interest in providing feedback to the applicant in order to improve the submission, then this is not the option to do that. it is to reject it.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton, Councillor Green, and then Watson.
I think it's really important, though, to note that the applicant has the ability to go and work with staff regardless of our decision. That is his prerogative. He has a prerogative. We're not saying don't go and work with staff. We're just saying we deny this application. And frankly, I don't know how many of you have stood on that part of St. Patrick in front of that lot. I have, but I also lived in that neighborhood for 4 months in 2010 when my husband and I were trying to find a house in Oak Bay, and we lived on Rosario with my sister. And we raised our son on the other part of St. Patrick further down. I have to tell you that this is a huge building on a very tiny lot. The lot is 6,600 square feet roughly. And that's the size of a large executive home. And onto that lot, where, you know, the applicant is asking to put 3 townhouses. I really think we have to be sensitive and empathetic. I think someone used the word empathetic tonight to the impacts on the neighborhood, but especially on the neighbors, the adjacent neighbors north and south. And now I understand the neighbor to the west. If we don't somehow provide input into these applications on behalf of our residents, then I have to question my job at the table, honestly. Is my job not to represent my community as best as we can, working with what we have and the tools we have? And I think Councillor Watson made a very good point about the other tools that we have at our disposal. So it's not that we don't have tools that can assist and that we don't have options for the applicant to go back and work with staff. So I just want to be clear, this is not a denial forever. This is a denial on this application.
Thank you. I think we're pretty clear on the options process here. I think appreciate Councillor Appleton raising this. I think it's. I'm not hearing anybody saying that we never want to see anything on this applicant. So I think the question at this table is what is the best process to allow for that feedback to be taken into account, Councillor Watson?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. As the mover of the motion, I just want to add a couple of comments because there are different views about how we should manage this. And one of the reasons that I suggested denial as opposed to the process, for example, that Councillor Appleton is suggesting, is I just don't want to see this designed by committee. A lot of things came up tonight. A lot of things came from the floor. I trust the developer if he really wants to continue a process for this piece of land that has been purchased to actually go away and think maybe more broadly than has happened already. And I think if we start giving direction on what we see tonight, that we've closed that down. And I think that's premature. I think we have set up a framework that would allow different things on that lot than what has been presented. And we will not see those options if we start, in effect, tinkering's not the right word, but trying to give direction around the edges for things that needs to be seen as a whole. So I am not comfortable with the just refer and here's our thoughts. I think I would like to see a fresh application come in. And the applicant has had an opportunity to hear quite generously tonight, both from council and from the community, some of those thoughts. There's lots of correspondence and also the staff at their disposal to actually figure this out. So I am sticking behind my motion.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. I have Councillor Braithwaite next in the speaking order.
Thank you so much. And I would just reiterate exactly what Councillor Green and Councillor Watson have said. I'm fully behind the denial of the variances, and I would like to see the proponent come back with something. And Councillor Watson's right. You've heard a lot of input tonight. Hopefully that will allow you to go away and come back with something that could be more would more fit into what we would be looking for to go onto this lot and what the neighbors would be looking for. So I'm standing by supporting the original motion as well.
Thank you. Councillor, did I have Councillor Smart? Did you speak? No. Anybody else? I don't have anybody else on my speaking list. I'm just going to speak to the motion. I was speaking in favor of the motion. I think, hearing what I've heard, I'm challenged here on the best course going forward, but I think I'm probably going to not support the motion that's on the floor, and if it does fail, I'll support a motion to refer it back to staff for some of these pieces. I think it's got enough merit to have some tweaks and see what can be done with the current application. If it doesn't fit, then we can always deny that, but it would save the timeline impacts of a decline and a redesign. So that's where I'm sitting at this particular moment. So a motion on the floor right now is to deny, which would essentially reset the clock, and the applicant can take what he's heard here from the public and from us and resubmit. So that's the motion on the floor. All those in favor of the motion to deny? I have Councillor Patterson, Braithwaite, I don't have to read them out. Those opposed, Councillor Appleton, Smart, and myself opposed. So that motion carries. So at this point, all I can say is take the feedback that we've had here. I think I'm hearing a lot of sort of general support for being very close, and we'll see what comes back. Hopefully this does come back. I would definitely encourage this to come back. I think it's with some nuance. I think it can have a lot of support at this table. So thank you for that, and thank you for the bravery being the first one. Not an easy task. All right, thank you. I know everybody's here for this. Most people are here for this one item. If you can if you're leaving now, leave quietly. I'm gonna just ask that we reorder the next two, just because the applicants for 8.2 can't be here. So we're going to, if we can just move to 8.3 and then come back to 8.2, if that's amenable to the council. Okay. I'll give people a moment to depart. Uh, 8.3 we're going to go to. They still want us to consider it, but if we can't come to any kind of, if it's not a clear yes or no, then we can always ask, we can have it come back. I just want to. Okay. So I'm just going to ask if we can have people, if they're not staying, leave far enough to allow us to get to the next items of business. Thank you very much. We move now to 8.3, just Ms. Plouffe and staff, if I may. I'm making a decision to move to 8.3 first, just so, okay? Just because we have the applicants here for that one, I want to give them the respect that we'll get to them as early as we can. So with that, I think, Mr. Muller, I turn to you for the introduction for 8.3.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. The district has received an upland siting design and development variance permit application for the address 2445 Lansdowne Road. This application was before Council previously. There were some changes to the design, and therefore it has come back to receive approval for those changes. In addition, there is a variance request for the rear patio for the interior side lot setback to be changed from 4.57 meters to 3.81 meters. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Muller. We have the applicant online, I understand. I'm going to turn to council. This is also open for public input as it has a variance attached to it. So are there any questions from members of council to staff on this application? I don't see any. I'm going to ask the members of the public. There's nobody in the room. We just cleared the room completely. But there may be some people online who are members of the public who wish to speak to the application. If anybody online wishes to, you can raise your hand using the reactions tab within Zoom. And then we can direct any questions to the applicant if that's necessary. I'm not seeing hands jumping up on this one. So I'll come back to this table.
Move receipt.
Moved and seconded for receipt of the, this is upland siting and design and development variance permit. This is for receipt. All those in favor? Any opposed? Unopposed?
Do you want it read out?
I believe we should read it out, yes.
Okay. I move that the upland siting and design application ADP 00180 to permit exterior renovations and upgrades and development variance permit DVP 00163 to reduce the interior side lot line setback from 4.57 meters to 3.81 meters for the property located at 2445 Lansdowne Road be approved.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on this item? Councillor Watson?
I'd just like to add that, as is noted in the staff report, this particular property has come to ADP a few times because of various iterations of the design, and most recently, of course, this was in front of them, and there was just a brief discussion and some conversation, and no issues at all in suggesting and recommending to council that it be approved. So this was not a difficult decision on their part.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm not seeing a lot of hands, so I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed, unopposed? I'm probably, the applicant is glad they didn't have the same application complexity as the last one, but thank you for your patience and waiting through that previous application, and good luck with your project. We'll move now to 8.2, just going backwards on this. I understand the applicants, unfortunately, were unable to join us tonight. So just as a courtesy, I think what we'll do is we'll consider it. If there's, questions that requires the applicant, then we can just defer this to a meeting in February. But if council feels it's supportable to move forward, then we can deal with it tonight, is essentially the task. Mr. Muller.
Thank you, Mayor. The district has received an application for 3611 Cadboro Bay Road. This application was previously before council in 2015. Changes were made to the plans, and therefore the applicant has brought back their design to council for approval. There's also a development variance permit for the allowable paved surface in the front yard, the height of the retaining walls, and the height of the retaining walls that are separated with less than 1.8 meters. That was also approved in 2015, but has since expired, and so is therefore before council again. The applicant was notified of the meeting and was unfortunately unable to attend, and as you mentioned, will be able to attend in February if there is any questions on them.
Thank you very much. Are there questions? Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
Thanks, and I think this is a question that staff could answer. The retaining walls, is it the retaining walls that are in the back of the property that are looking for the variance, or is it all the way down that side that's looking for the variance?
Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. Through you, Mayor. Actually, it's the retaining walls to the front of the property. Yes, the ones that lead from the front yard to the front of the house. Those ones are the ones that are less than 1.8 meters separated, and as well as exceed the height.
Such a challenging site. I mean, I can imagine. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smart.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, to staff, I just wanted a question about the two driveway accesses, and if staff could just remind me of the bylaw rules around that in this particular site. I don't think it was flagged, so I'm assuming it's conforming, but I know there's a lot of instances in which you can't have two driveway accesses to a site, so I would just love some background on that. Thank you.
Mr. Muller.
Thank you, Councillor Smart. Through you, Mayor. There is requirements of two driveway accesses in the driveway access bylaw. Currently, they need to be approved by the director. You're allowed to have two access as long as they're director approved.
Thank you. Councillor Watson, you said you wished to speak to this.
Yeah, thank you. I want to say that tonight I would be prepared to move a motion to actually approve this, given all the work that's been done. And I just want to provide a little history, because
here's what I'm going to suggest.
Yes.
Why don't you have a motion to receive it,
yes,
and
I'll
then
make the
you can
motion.
move the motion for approval, and then you can speak to it.
Thank you. I will first move a motion for receipt.
Moved and seconded. I'll call the question on receipt. I'm going to just call for public input before I get to the next motion. I don't see a lot of people online, so I'm guessing there's not much public input. So, did I call the question, sorry, on the receipt? No. All those in favor of receipt? Any opposed? Unopposed? Before we move to the consideration of the application, are there any members of the public who wish to address council on the application for 3611 Cadboro Bay Road? I'm looking online, but I see no other people online at this moment that are not staff. So nobody in the room. So I'm gonna go with there's no additional public input. And so why don't we get to a motion? If I see anybody come into the meeting and ask and put their hand up, I will certainly stop and give them the opportunity. Please go ahead, Councillor Watson.
And I will move the staff recommendation. I'll read it out. That council approve Upland Siting Design Application ADP 00174 for the construction of a new single-family home and development variance permit DVP 00157 to exceed the allowable paved surface in the front yard, the maximum height for retaining walls, and the combined height of retaining walls less than 1.8 meters.
Second.
And speak to it, Councillor Watson.
Thank you. In bringing the motion forward and supporting this now, I just want to say that a lot of work has been done by the applicant, and in response to some quite legitimate concerns raised iteratively by the advisory design panel. When the application was first brought forward, it was really missing some very important information. Sometimes those things may matter less, because many of the applications that come in for the Uplands would be things that are happening in people's backyards and really have no visibility to their neighbors or the street. In this case, this is a double-fronted lot and is very prominently frontward facing onto Beech Drive. So taking that extra time to work through the things that were missing was, in my view, very important. The applicant, I think, struggled with some of that direction. So this has taken maybe more time than would have been necessary, with maybe different support or different design support for the package. But I would say at this point it is now at a space where I think it really meets our own standards under the Uplands design guidelines and our own wishes for that community. So I thank the applicant for sticking with it, and I'm glad that I hope that we will be able to move this forward for them.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Are there any other comments on the application in front of us? I have one small one, and that is just I was actually kind of pleased to see the approach with the garage access off of Beech Drive. There's a little section there that has a few of these tucked away, and it's actually a very unique sort of design element of that stretch, and it was nice to see that there was a way of accommodating that in there, because I think it actually enhances. Usually you don't want garages facing the street, but I think in this case it's actually quite a nice little sort of design feature. So I'm just, perhaps we can just pass that on to the owners. I appreciate the work done to make that work. All right, see no other comments, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, that carries. And I think that, is there any new business? Members of council? And then the motion to adjourn.
Move adjournment.
Moved and seconded, all those in favor? Any opposed, none opposed? 10 minutes to spare.